Call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mayor Richard Stewart. I'll be chairing tonight's public hearing and the council meeting that will be held immediately following this meeting. Welcome to our council chambers. I want to apologize on behalf of two members of council. Councillor Craig Hodge, who's out of town today. I know that he has told me that he'll be dialing into the internet version of tonight's public hearing and watching as we hear this stuff. Of course, all of our public hearings are also taped for webcast on demand subsequently. And Councillor Asmundson similarly has expressed that he will be watching the tape. Councillor Asmundson's not well tonight, so he expresses his regrets for not being here. So this is a public hearing that will be held into the bylaws that will be introduced to you in a moment by the City Clerk. Council for City of Coquitlam has given first reading to these bylaws, and we've asked that a public hearing be held to get the opinion of the public. Staff from the City's Planning and Development Department will present a summary of the proposed bylaw, and then the floor will be open to anyone in attendance that wishes to present his or her views on that bylaw. Those that have pre-registered will be given first opportunity to speak, and we have a speakers list. Once we've gone through that list, we will then open the floor to anyone else that's in attendance that wants to make his or her views known to council. I stress to you all that this is a public hearing. It's an opportunity for anyone who has a view on the proposed bylaws to make that view known to council members. Council members are here with an open mind and want to listen to your input. No one has prejudged the outcome of these applications. Now, council has asked me to set out some rules that we apply to these public hearings. First of all, it's not a question and answer period. It's not an opportunity to debate the merits or otherwise of the proposed bylaws with either council members, with staff, or with anyone in the audience that might have a different point of view than your own. We ask that you restrict your comments to the proposed bylaw that's on the floor, and to be as brief and concise as possible. We ask speakers to respect a 5-minute time limit in order that everyone who wishes to speak is able to do so. Speakers are permitted to speak more than once, but only if they're providing new or additional information. Now, some people have discomfort with microphones. Some people are not comfortable speaking in front of public, and so one of the ways in which we as a council have adopted in order to try to ease that discomfort and make everyone feel as comfortable as possible and feel like they can give us their opinions is we ask that the audience not respond. No clapping, but no booing, no cheering, no jeering of anyone that speaks tonight. Everyone gets to speak his or her mind without that audience reaction. We find that way it's less intimidating for folks who may not have kind of taken the microphone in many years. As chair of this hearing, I reserve the right to conclude any presentation that doesn't relate to the proposed bylaw that becomes abusive or which becomes repetitive of views that speaker has already made known to council members. Now, one important thing, if you have something written that you want to be part of the public record for tonight's public hearing, you must hand it in to this desk, to the city clerk's desk, prior to the adjournment of that item on the public hearing. After we adjourn an item on a public hearing, the courts have ruled that we can't hear anything else. We don't get any more information except information that we've asked for or information that we heard at the public hearing. So please hand it in prior to adjournment of that public hearing item if you want it to be part of the permanent record for the meeting. Immediately following adjournment of the public hearing tonight, a regular council meeting will convene in order that council can give consideration to a number of items, including items on the council agenda. We've been asked by both council members that are not here. They did want to be part of the vote on the item, so they will be watching, as I say, either tonight or in the subsequent days. They've asked for the vote on tonight's item on Foster and North Road to be postponed until the next council meeting, so that council has acquiesced on that. We'll now call on Mr. Gilbert to introduce the first bylaw on tonight's agenda, and we'll have the planning staff make a presentation on that first item.
Thank you, Your Worship. The First item is an application to amend the citywide official community plan and the City of Coquitlam zoning bylaw in order to revise the land use designation and zoning of 655 North Road and 515 to 525 Foster Avenue in order to introduce new policies which support the development of affordable and special needs housing. These are bylaws number 4561, 4558, 4559, and 4560.
Your Worship and members of Council, my name is Michael Dhaliwal, a development planner at the City. The bylaws being considered tonight are to accommodate a development in the Coquitlam neighborhood. The development site is in the core and shoulder areas of the Transit-Oriented Development Strategy, TDS. The core is shown in blue, the shoulder is shown in green. The Blue Sky site is within 500 meters of the future Coquitlam Evergreen Line station. Specifically, the two sites are located at 655 North Road and 515-525 Foster Avenue. The current land use designation for the sites is medium density apartment residential, as is the existing land uses north, south, and east of the site. The applicant is proposing to amend the OCP and redesignate the North Road site Transit Village Commercial and the Foster Avenue site High Density Apartment Residential. The sites are currently zoned RM2 three-story apartment residential. Zoning to the east is RM3 multi-story apartment residential. Zoning to the north is RM2, and zoning to the south is both RM2 and RM3. The applicant is proposing to rezone the North Road site to C7, Transit Village Commercial, and the Foster Avenue site to RM6, multi-story high-density apartment residential. The applicant is proposing to construct 3 high-rise towers, 860 total strata units, and 3 commercial units, and 1 secured rental building with 57 units over 3 phases. Phase 1 at 515 Foster Avenue, the northeast corner of Foster and Whiting, will be 1 strata residential tower, 37 stories, 330 units. Phase 2, 525 Foster Avenue, the eastern portion of the site, will be 1 strata residential tower, 29 stories, 225 units, and 1 rental building, 5 stories, 57 units. Phase 1 and Phase 2 will build to the maximum density permitted in the RM6 zone, 4.0 FAR. Floor area, FAR is the floor area times the lot area.
Floor area over the lot area, wouldn't it?
Over the lot area. Plus 0.4 for the rental building, for a total of 4.40. They're seeking a 0.4 FAR exemption, which is a TDS Section 2.1.3 policy, which an applicant can consider in order to build rental accommodations. Phase 3, 655 North Road, is 1 strata residential tower, 28 stories, 231 units, 3 commercial units along North Road, and that site will be built to the maximum density permitted in the C7 zone, 4.5 FAR. In addition, the project will have 21 adaptable units. At all times during construction, the applicant has committed to maintain 52 rental units, and relocation assistance and incentives will be provided to current tenants. To accommodate this development, an OCP text amendment is proposed, and to add a policy to consider additional density for affordable or special needs housing on a case-by-case basis for sites that are located in the TDS core and shoulder areas, are in close proximity, walking or cycling distance to transit service, commercial services, and public amenities, meets an affordable housing or special needs housing need, and addresses design, massing, servicing, parking, and transportation requirements. Along with this, a zoning bylaw text amendment is required, and this would be to add a provision to permit additional density on sites for affordable or special needs housing on a case-by-case basis. This proposed bylaw would designate 515-525 Foster Avenue as a special needs housing site and permit density that exceeds the maximum permitted under the RM6 zone for floor area used for the secured market rental building. Staff recommends second, third, fourth, and final readings to OCP Text Amendment Bylaw number 4561, 2015. They also recommend second and third readings to zoning text amendment bylaw 4558-2015. Recommend second and third readings to OCP map amendment bylaw 4559-2015. And recommend second and third readings to zoning map amendment bylaw 4560-2015.
Thank you. And just a quick question to clarify, FAR is floor area over lot area, not times lot area. Good. There's a nod from the planning department. There was a typo in the slide. Okay, the applicants will come before us now, and I gather that they will need some time to not so much explain their project as to perhaps give some information in response to some of the queries that have been received by council so far, and I know that they have some of that information that's been asked for, so I'm going to give a bit of latitude there. Beginning speakers are Colin Bosa and Chris Dickiasco. Get it wrong every time. I'll mispronounce Mr. Bosa's name too. Mr. Bosa.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. My name is Colin Bosa, and I'm representing the applicant Blue Sky Properties. I'm joined here today with Chris Dickiakos and Mike Ali Voivodich. There you go. Tough names today, our architects. Steve Zuliani, who's our development consultant, Mark Pina from our office, Dylan Chernoff, our landscape architect, and Peter Joyce, our traffic consultant. So they're all available should you have any questions. Our presentation today will be in two parts. Chris Dickiakos will come up and talk to the architecture of the building, and then Steve Zuliani will be up a little later to talk to more about the softer side of the development. So you may want to hold your questions till Steve on those aspects till Steve presents. And before I call up Chris, I'd just like to add that the Bosa family's been developing in Coquitlam for many decades. We have a wonderful relationship with the city. We always try to do our best to ensure that we're building, smart developments for the area. We think we've done that, and we look forward to not only working with the city on this project, but many more to come. And with that, I'd like to call up Chris Dickiakos to walk us through the architecture of the building.
Thank you, Mr. Dickiakos.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. I'm happy here today to come and give just a brief presentation on the architecture of the proposed development. I won't go through the context. Michael, I think, has done a good job of that already. But just to reorient everybody again, North Road, main arterial, on the west side of the property, Foster Avenue, City Collector Road, to the south of the property. The location of the future Coquitlam SkyTrain station, again within 500 meters of the site. The two sites, the Foster Road site and the North Road, the Foster Street site and the North Road site. Adjacent to the property, we have a new 4-story residential development to the east. To the south, we have a 5-story residential development. We have several parks in the area, Cottonwood Park to the east, Coquitlam Park to the north, and the Coquitlam Community Garden, which will be providing some public access and walkways to. Some site photos of the existing conditions. So the site currently has several rental buildings on site, totaling 112 units. All of them are 3-story buildings. The site itself has transformed through this process. Due to the increased density, we've had to dedicate significant portions of the site to accommodate the additional traffic that's to be generated and create appropriate road networks around the site to accommodate. So the original property lines in blue. The new property lines shown in red. Again, you can see how much smaller the development site has become from the original site. Specifically, dedications on the North Road site total 12,800 square feet, or 28% of the total pre-dedicated site. That's the site that we're proposing for C7 Transit Village Commercial and a 4.5 FAR. The Foster Avenue site has over 25,000 square feet of dedications, or 22.4% of the total site area, proposed for RM6 and a 4.0 FAR. Locations of buildings. Again, we tried to place buildings carefully and respectfully in relation to each other and the neighborhood. Starting with the Phase 1 building, which is highlighted here, 37-story building of 330 total units. Phase 2 includes a 29-story, 225-unit building and a purpose-built 57-unit, 5-story residential building. Phase 3 will be the North Road site, 28-story building and 231 total units. We've maintained significant distances between the buildings to maintain privacy and view corridors, so 120 feet to the west and 100 feet to the east. Again, significant view corridors through by creating these thin profile towers. We wanted to pay particular attention to the ground plane, which is really where the pedestrians, those walking the area from the surrounding area, will really look and get a better sense of the building. So what we wanted to do is to really surround the base of the building with low-rise. Specifically, townhomes were appropriate, amenity buildings, and commercial development. So starting with Phase 1, we've wrapped townhouses at the base of the new east-west connector road. There's an image of the townhouses, so they'll each have individual access points, just as you would a single-family home. On the Phase 2 portion, again, townhouses facing onto Foster. And here's a view of those individual townhouses. The rental building will actually have all its lowest level units with individual access points off both internal and external sidewalks. And there's a view of the residential building entry for the rental building. Townhouses on the Phase 3 portion, which connect to the commercial. Here's a view of those units. Commercial totaling over 9,000 square feet facing North Road. That wraps Foster, North Road, and the new East-West Road. So again, we're trying to maintain active uses along all street frontages. And there's a view of the commercial retail units. As part of this development and as part of Phase 1 of the development, we're providing a significant amenity component which will be for the use of all the residents of this development. This particular amenity building totals 13,700 square feet, which is significantly more than what you would get in a typical development as such. But it gives the opportunity to have indoor basketball courts, change rooms, meeting spaces, and all sorts of other facilities that otherwise may not be available off-site. As part of that also, here's a view of the, from the roof of that amenity building. Each individual building will also get its own amenity space. So you have the big central shared space, but each building will also have its own private space as well. We've got all vehicular access coming off the north side, off of the east-west connector road. All tower entries are located very close to street sidewalks. The landscaping is a significant portion of this development. Again, because we were able to confine the buildings to small footprints, we really wanted to take advantage of the landscaping opportunities. So part of the features include several courtyard areas, which will have outdoor seating, fireplaces, amenity patios, trellised and covered for outdoor use. We've got a children's play area off of Foster Avenue adjacent the amenity building, again for good viewing. Each building also has significant water features which lead to the entries of the building. As part of the connection system, we have dedication through the middle of the Foster Avenue site. That connection will lead to the future Coquitlam SkyTrain station to the north and connection to the Coquitlam Community Garden to the south. Further landscaping for the property. The roof decks also, so all flat roof areas on the low-rise buildings will get amenity area. So the amenity building will get landscape. The podium roof will get landscape on the Foster Avenue building. The total landscaped area for the project is over 49,000 square feet, so well over an acre of green space will be provided as part of this development. Typical tower floor plans. The tower floor plans are taken to the maximum allowed under the OCP at 7,500 square feet. We have 10 units per floor and a real variety of unit types, 39% one bed, 9% one and dens, 40% two bed, and 2% three bedroom units. The rental building, again, very similar. We wanted to create a real variety of unit types. We have 57 total units in this building, 23% studio, 42% one bed, and 35% two bedroom. Range of sizes from 450 to just about 900 square feet for the rental building. As part of the North Road commercial frontage, again, we wanted to really animate all street fronts. Total commercial area totals just over 9,000 square feet, and we suggest 3 commercial units could front that side. Here's a view of that commercial frontage. So again, we're really trying to highlight upgraded materials, canopies that surround the entire frontage for rain protection, and the ability for potential tenants to spill out with tables and chairs to help animate all the street frontages. For the buildings themselves, from a distance, we've created 3 varying building heights on the towers. The building on the Foster Road side is a much glassier, lighter looking building. The other 2 buildings, we've taken very large balconies and outdoor spaces. So we've got not only the landscaped areas, but we also have the landscape or the roof decks for each individual unit. To extend out, we've created a significant number of differing upstands to create a real visual variety, because these buildings will be seen from a distance. The pedestrian has a different experience than what one will see from a distance. A view from the north of the building, again, similar consistency of the types, but again, 3 very different looking buildings. Again, the commercial street frontage wrapping on the east-west connector, and the significant landscape at the base. Another view of the amenity building. So as I mentioned, the amenity building not only has great indoor space, it has great outdoor space as well for the use of the tenants. You can also see a better detail of the landscape and water features that will lead to the entry of this particular building. Thank you. I will note that we have our planning consultant, Steve Zuliani, who will be making a presentation after the next few speakers. Thank you.
I believe Councillor Reid has a question for you, Mr. Diaz.
Yes, good evening. Nice to see you. Will each of these buildings, the Tower 1, Tower 2, have their own strata?
They will have their own strata,
and
yes.
And rental will be its own strata?
It will be, yes.
And commercial?
They will be, as far as I understand right now, the developer will be keeping them and renting them as their own.
Will they be part of the strata of Tower 3 then?
They would be part of the strata of Tower 3,
Tower
correct.
3, okay.
Yes.
And the amenity, I'm asking because I'm interested in costs for after-built. The amenity is attached to strata in Tower 1 or not?
I'm not sure about that. I'll actually defer that to the developer.
Okay, I just want to know if the amenity building would have its own strata and then all, including the rental building, would be able to use it. That's my question.
It is set up so that all buildings in the development would be able to use that.
And I'd like
space.
to know how it's going to be paid for, how the cost would be allocated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get that answer from the proponent. Councillor Zerillo.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question. I did ask this when this came to first reading. It was mentioned that there was some space for pets because we could have hundreds of dogs. You mentioned about the kid space. Where would the pet space be? I think you
I'm going to
about
defer that to our landscape architect. But as I mentioned, we do have over an acre of open space on the ground plane, so there is lots of room for dog runs as well.
Okay. And then I had a question that may be more for staff, but it's about the possibility of daycare in the amenity building. Do we have bylaw that would allow for a daycare during the day in the amenity building?
Turn to staff. Ms. Tiffany.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, accessory home occupation is a permitted use within our residential zones with certain conditions, and it would also be permitted as a principal use in the C7 zone.
Okay. In the C7, it would be principal use. Thank you.
No, this one would be.
Okay, we're good. Thank you very much, Mr. Diakos. And I believe you were sending up a landscape architect or somebody for the last bit, or did we have something else, or no? Okay.
Good evening. I'm Mark Pena from Blue Sky Properties. Just to answer those couple of questions, in our later slide, Steve is actually going to show, so in the landscape area, we've actually made special provisions for areas for dogs. It's something we've been doing in a lot of our buildings lately, recognizing that more and more owners have pets. So we're going to have designated pet areas outside. The other thing, we propose putting in, doggy pickup bag stations and potentially even water fountains or stuff like that. Another thing we've been putting in buildings is actually doggy wash stations somewhere in the parkade. Again, recognizing when people are living in smaller spaces and potentially sharing it with, a couple people, they don't want to wash their dog in their one bathtub. So we've been putting them in our buildings as of late. With respect to the amenity space, so just to clarify, the amenity pavilion is, there's actually a separate amenity for the rental building. So it would be shared amongst the strata units, the amenity building. With 850 units, I assume the question is how, obviously these things can be costly. We think that given the number of units, that it will be reasonable to keep it as, a central amenity that's important to all of them and be upkept. So.
Anything further on the amenity share? Why don't we activate that?
Just repeat.
It was Councillor Reid's question, so we'll get her.
Rental building will be able to use the amenity building.
It will not. It has its own separate amenity.
Thought, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and so the strata for the amenity building will be divided between the three towers?
Correct.
Thank you.
And just, sorry, your original question. So it will be part of Tower 1.
Yeah.
But all three towers will have a cost-sharing arrangement to pay for it.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And did we have anybody else? No, that was it. Okay.
For your worship, there's a further speaker, but he's speaker number 6 in the order.
Oh, of course, yes. Mr. Steve Zuliani, consultant with, you want to? That would be fine, yeah. We typically find it's easier if we get as much information on the table first, rather than have speaker after speaker come up with questions and then have the questions answered and then the speakers have to come back up for the follow-up. So let's get the information on the floor.
Right. Okay, yes.
Don't have to repeat anything that's already been said, just go straight forward.
Try not to. So, good evening, Your Worship, members of Council, others present. So, on behalf of Blue Sky Properties, Steve Zuliani, Zuliani Company Consultants. So, these are the sort of the softer items that I just wanted to cover off in this. I'll try to move through it relatively quickly. Just on public consultation, I'll try to zip through this. Been going on for 3 years, including 5 meetings with the Coquitlam Community Association, regular communications with the President of the Oakdale Neighborhood Association, and meetings and exchange information with the chair of the Tri-Cities Homeless and Housing Task Group. We did hold 2 public information meetings. We provided 4 information notices to all the existing tenants on both sites, as well as ongoing communications with them. We did hold a separate tenants-only information meeting. We've met with 4 nearby strata councils and offered to meet with 3 additional nearby strata councils. One of the items that did come in as a requested, something you wanted to see on the site, is the outdoor amenities. I'll just cover off what Chris didn't. Lower right corner. So as Mark just stated, that yes, the plan now is, because it was brought up at first reading, to have some dog care areas, and then the 3 garden plots, because we know it's important to this community as well. Again, you've seen this, so the amenity center itself, just wanted to point out a few things about it. So the main space for this is nearly 14,000 square feet, gym and fitness space with full washrooms with showers and lockers, and also meeting rooms and other large spaces. And just for comparison for size-wise, the main area of this is equivalent in size to gyms 2 and 3 at the Pine Tree Community Center gyms that you're more familiar with. Up on the second level, we'll also provide for a roughly 30 by 80 foot social or meeting room, additional space for exercise and recreational activities. On the commercial side, and Chris already mentioned, so I won't double up on that too much. I just wanted to point out that 3 spaces right now that may get divided up when it comes around to development, but importantly, there's dedicated commercial parking is on the first level when you come into the parkade, and by the red line you can see it's basically very easy access from your car basically out. You're not having to go up and down stairs. You basically come out the same level out the front under weather protection around to the front, as well as convenient access for the apartment or from the apartments above for that. On the rental, the purpose-built rental housing, there's been considerable discussion on how affordable the rental rates will be. If we use CMHC's affordability indicator of 30%, and we apply that to the 2013 gross income of the residents on this site, of the 2 sites, that works out to a CMHC criteria rent of $1,072. Out of interest, the current rent on the site is just a little bit lower than that at $1,026, and these are in the 50-year-old buildings. And the rent for the purpose-built units will need to be competitive, compete against market rates, so we don't know what those rates will be. Our best guess right now is forecasting them to be in the order of about maybe 4%, or the $1,200 per month, so about 4% above the CMHC baseline criteria. The new strata units, which will have a higher level of finish, they will have more amenities, as we've just discussed, as well as better views. But again, those that do become rental by the private owners, they still have to compete within the Coquitlam rental marketplace. We're guessing right now that maybe they'll be able to rent at about maybe 9% above the CMHC baseline. And there are other choices for rental. A survey that we had Gateway Property Management complete, they found average rents for units within a 20-minute drive of the subject site to be the $1,090 per month, so pretty close to the CMHC criteria for that. I just also wanted to point out for those that look at the BC housing income limits, they come up with a similar type baseline as with the CMHC's criteria. The other thing that's important, Chris did touch on, is that the purpose-built rental housing, there's quite a variety of units that are being proposed within that, with over 1/3 of them being suitable for families with children or grandparents or kids that want to leave home, that sort of thing, in terms of 2-bedroom and 2-bedroom and den for that. So the purpose rental building will be covenanted for 50 years to stay as rental. And all of the market condominium units, even the townhomes, will have rental disclosure statements filed by the developer. That means that any of those strata units can be made available for rent, and future strata councils can't change that. So that is a permanent matter. If we assume the 25% general findings in the Vancouver Lower Mainland, that 25% of the strata units did become available for rent, that would add in the order of 204 additional rental units on this site, which would result in a more than 2-for-1 replacement. In terms of the rental relocation assistance, just to provide a bit of information about the current tenants. Right now, nearly 60% of the existing tenants have been there for less than 3 years, and only 5% have been there for longer than 10 years. Allowing for vacancies, of the 112 units on this site, about 25% are occupied or have been occupied for more than 3 years. And just as a comparison, I think Coquitlam's most recent rental replacement, over 50% of the renters at Windsor Gate had been there for longer than 20 years, so quite a different situation. On the Foster Road site, the first rentals to be removed, currently 18% of those units are vacant, and 20% of the units are rented by adult friends, and only 10% of the units are rented by seniors. Again, by comparison, at Windsor Gate, it was over 75% were seniors at that time. The relocation assistance program is multifaceted, basically started with ongoing communications since 2012. Blue Sky will be offering 6 months notice versus the 2 months minimum requirement. I've also hired an on-site rental relocation coordinator to communicate with and assist the tenants with relocation. As well, just a recent decision is that one of the vacant suites are going to be set up as a resource center. It's going to have a computer, printer, telephone in there for the tenants to make use of, working with the coordinator in terms of if they desire to try to find a new spot to live. Also, be waiving 2 months' rent if tenants relocated within 4 months of the eviction notice being formally provided, or 3 months' rent if they did hang around for another 1 or 2 months. Plus, anyone who's been there for longer than 5 years will get another month's bonus on that. So between 2 and 4 months. And this is versus the minimum requirement of 1 month. And if you look at the current rents, this translates into an amount of, say, $1,900 to $6,000 in order to assist those needing to move. Also making vacant apartments in the Cedar Grove on the North Road site first available for qualified tenants. And also, it was interesting, this is a request that came from the Coquitlam Community Association, that tenants or even immediate family of the tenants would be gifted the last 12 months of paid rent towards a down payment on any Blue Sky or any BOSA Properties development, not just in this location. And that could translate into something in the order of $12,000 towards a home purchase. I think another important point is that the strata housing also has a variety of housing types, but just wanted to point out that 57% of them are going to be of the more affordable variety, both for renters and for purchasers, being the one-bedroom or one-bedroom and den for that. The project will be making quite significant contributions for community benefits, including nearly $13 million in density bonus payments, as well as $0.7 million in community amenity charges, and also $6.5 million in development cost charges, fees, including $3.2 million towards park acquisition and park improvements. The roadway improvements are also significant, as mentioned, so that's basically land and construction costs for the new east-west road, same thing for the new north-south road, as well as land and construction costs for adding a left turn lane on Foster, west from Whiting Way. We had our traffic consultants, Bunt & Associates, do a traffic impact assessment. And these new roadway improvements I just mentioned will result in no net gain in traffic congestion at the Foster, New East-West Road, and Cottonwood intersections at North Road. A bit technical here, but those the calculations all came back. The forecasted movements of those intersections would all fall within the best level of service, A level of service at those intersections after full development. On-site parking, in excess of 1,100 on-site parking stalls, about the same number of bicycle parking stalls, which is interesting. And to justify the requested 5% parking reduction, Blue Sky will be providing 2 share cars, as well as covering 50% of the cost for over 80 3-zone transit passes, as well as a welcome pack on transportation options. So really the intent being to encourage transit travel. As mentioned, just as maybe a different way to display it, if approved, the development will be built out in 3 phases. The first phase being the center, including the amenity center. Second phase, including the purpose-built rental building. And third phase, including the commercial space for neighborhood services. So in summary, this development provides, we feel, a mixed-use development on a well-located site with housing choices close to rapid transit, desirable amenities, improved roadways, plus considerable funds for a growing Coquitlam, specifically substantial on-site amenities, significant community benefit contributions, help to hopefully provide or get the Coquitlam Community Center built sooner for the community, modern rental housing secured for 50 years, fair rental relocation assistance program for the existing tenants, new roadways to accommodate increased traffic in the area, improved streetscape, public open spaces, and new neighborhood services. Thank you.
Okay. Very quickly, you mentioned car share. Those are 2 cars, not 2 spaces.
2 cars.
Got it. Sometimes it's just spaces. Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. Our next registered speaker is Michael Bauman, 301-545 Foster Avenue.
Good evening. I will be shorter. My name is Michael Bauman, and I live on Foster Avenue. And there's a long list of arguments to be made against the rezoning project of our neighborhood, and I hope to hear many different ones tonight. Here's one from me, and it is called the argument of unequal resources. What is the situation? We have two parties with conflicting goals, those requesting a rezoning and those content with the current zoning. In a situation like this, and from a democratic standpoint, it is always a good idea to look at the resources available to each party. On the one hand, we have developers, and developers have deep pockets, and they have the money to pay for services of urban planners, of zoning specialists, of architects, architectural drafters, support staff, lawyers, lobbyists, marketers, and two more added, what I just heard, planning consultants, traffic consultants. They have the money to pay for technical reports, for legal opinions, advertising campaigns, and political campaigns. On the other hand, there's us, the local residents. We have to earn a living during the day, and when we come home to a place that is supposed to be our refuge, we have to worry. And we have to spend our spare time to inform ourselves about the assault on our neighborhood, and we have to learn to fight back. Even tonight, the representatives of the developer are earning money just by being here, while the residents are working pro bono. It is a situation of gross injustice, and the responsibility of the government is to prevent gross injustice. And if we, the residents, had a fraction of the resources that are available to the developer, I can promise you we would all be home tonight. Now, what governments often do in a situation like this is seek a compromise. And the compromise often takes the form of knocking a couple of floors off a monster building, and this compromise is then sold back to us as a great victory in public consultation. I don't want a compromise. I want the City Council to abide by the published 2012 land use designations for the Coquitlam neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sandy Burpee from the Tri-City Homelessness and Housing Task Group. Mr. Burpee lives at 985 Corona Crescent. Mr. Burpee.
Good evening, Your Worship and councillors. I believe you have my address. I'm here this evening representing the Tri-Cities Homelessness and Housing Task Group. We recognize the need for replacing aging rental apartment buildings in the Coquitlam neighborhood that are reaching their end of life and not making the best use of the land density-wise, considering the proximity of the new Evergreen line. Given that the Blue Sky development will include long-term purpose-built rental housing, we are not opposed to this development. Blue Sky, in its rental housing strategy, when published, reported that 71% of tenants had lived at the two complexes for less than 3 years. So to me, this underscores the importance of this housing for immigrants and for persons just entering the job market as they enhance their employability. I've met twice with representatives from Blue Sky developments. We've had several email exchanges, and throughout I would characterize our dialogue as open and frank. We appreciate that Blue Sky has been proactive in the communication with the tenants and have taken initiative to do a door-to-door survey of tenants in Medallion Court last October. Our interest in development focuses on two areas. First is relocation assistance, and the second is the affordability of the rents in a new purpose-built rental building. With regards to relocation assistance, we believe that that Blue Sky's relocation assistance program does reflect their intent to be fair and equitable for existing tenants. Over time, they have enhanced the relocation assistance program as they recognize the needs of the current residents. We do have a concern about the affordability of the rents in the new purpose-built rental building. As I mentioned before, Blue Sky carried out a door-to-door survey of Milling Court in last fall. They've also accumulated data from the 2011 National Household Survey, as well as 2013 Environics Analytics survey as well. First of all, one thing, it was not possible to find out what the affordability challenges are of individual current tenants right now, because we couldn't get access, wouldn't expect to get access to information on their incomes. But using the information that Blue Sky developed, we can make some general statements. First of all, according to the 2011 National Household Survey, 47% of the tenants in the survey tract, which is the rectangle bounded by North Road, Smith Avenue, Blue Mountain, and Austin, are spending more than 30% of their household income on shelter, and typically 30% is deemed as the upper limit of affordability. A current tenant renting a two-bedroom apartment in Milling Court will potentially face an increase as much as $310 or 31% for two bedrooms in the new rental building, and that's based on Blue Sky's forecast average rents for two-bedroom apartments. A household earning the average income of $42,876 at the two complexes in Milling Court and Cedar Grove will pay 39% of income for a new two-bedroom unit and 41% for the forecast strata rents. And finally, and certainly of great importance to the task group, is that single-parent households currently have an average annual income in the survey tract of just over $33,000, and they would pay 45% of their income for a new one-bedroom apartment and 51% for a new two-bedroom purpose-built unit. Comparing rents, a little different from what Steve showed. Here I'm looking at specific unit sizes, although recognizing for the Blue Sky rents that they cover a range of units, different amenities, and so on. But so here we show the current average rent of Milling Court, two-bedroom, $990. The current or 2014 average purpose-built rents in the Tri-Cities, BC Housing's housing income limits, the forecast average rents for the Blue Sky purpose-built units, and finally the increase of the purpose-built rents over the housing income limits. Specifically, the housing income limits established by BC Housing are the upper limit on income for households to be eligible for social housing. And in fact, if you take 30% of those housing income limits and divide by 12 months, you'll come up with the rents that are shown there. Those rents that are shown there are specifically the average rents for Metro Vancouver in 2014 as developed by CMHC and their annual rent survey. And so what BC Housing does is take the average Metro Vancouver rents and they divide by 0.3 and multiply 12, and they come up with the housing income limits. I think that those housing income limits are practical targets for replacement rents in the purpose-built building. The current tenants in Medallion Court and certainly future tenants in who are evicted from Cedar Grove who can't afford the purpose-built units are going to have to find affordable housing in the area. And with regards to vacancy rates of purpose-built rentals in the Tri-Cities has dropped pretty significantly from 2013 to 2014. And 3% vacancy is typically considered a balanced market. And so this suggests that over time, as more of the aging rental units in Coquitlam are developed, the vacancy rate is going to decrease even further and going to increase the challenges in current tenants of finding alternatives that they can't afford. So the task group recommends, first of all, that to confirm or refute our concern about the affordability of alternative housing, that Blue Sky be asked to provide, prior to the demolition of Medallion Court, the number of tenant households that sought the support or the help of the on-site rental coordinators' assistants, particularly the ones that are unable to find alternative viable housing. And second of all, that the number of tenant households that have taken advantage of the gifting of the previous 12 months to purchase a strata unit as well. So Blue Sky be asked to report on those two particular pieces of data prior to the demolition. And second of all, recommend that the city negotiate a package of additional incentives from with Blue Sky sufficient to reduce the rents in the purpose-built rental building to current household income limits, or a portion of the purpose-built rental units below the housing income limits. So those are my comments, or the task group's comments, with respect to the developments. I do want to add just briefly bylaw 4558-2015 to designate sites for affordable special needs housing and permit additional density. I believe the city needs to identify the affordability for the target demographic. In my mind, the target demographic should be households with incomes in the range of low and low to moderate incomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Sandy. Quick question to clarify the your second point there. First one in your letter, though. Looking to negotiate reduced rent down to the BC housing income limit. So in your presentation, you're saying the two-bedroom was 14. You're looking for a negotiation down to the 1238. Was that your specific ask?
Yes, in the case of the two-bedroom, down to 1238, one-bedroom, 1,000. And I'm just suggesting that because it seems to me that clearly any new purpose-built rental building has to be more expensive than current average rents. The current average rents in Metro Vancouver and certain Tri-Cities reflect buildings that that were built decades ago, and there has been very little construction from the decades ago until now, when rental is starting to be built again. So I think realistically, they have to recognize that there needs to be an increase of rents. That seems to me kind of halfway between current average rents and market rents as proposed by Blue Sky.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Yep. And one more, Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. I imagine the developer has crunched their numbers pretty thoroughly and come up with what they think can work. And specifically on your suggestion that the city negotiate or something with the developer to try to get the rents down, what sort of mechanisms do you have in mind that might be available to have that happen?
There are some additional suggestions or incentives suggested in the transit development strategy and proposed in the housing affordability strategy. One would be to forgive the community amenity contributions. Another has to do with reduced parking spaces, and not specifically mentioned, but it seems to me that forgiving the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund contribution, that's $1.7 million. If you take that along with the CACs of $683,000, that's $2.4 million that could be used to provide more affordable rentals.
So there's a lot of power that's within the city's ability to do this. Did you do any number crunching on your own to see what sort of impact that would have on the money that would go to the general use of the community? I mean, that's money that the CACs would if that's not for general use but for this specific use, would have an impact as well. Have you thought about that? And
well, I have. The CACs in this case, I understand, are going towards the YMCA's / city's recreation site. Blue Sky has been demonstrated as putting in quite an elaborate amenity facility for the 3 towers as well as for the purpose-built rental units. So it seems to me that they are providing amenities already for their residents. I don't know specifically what impact that, say, that maximum $2.4 million might have on the rents, the purpose-built rents. I do know from talking from Blue Sky is that there really isn't a business case to be made for purpose-built rentals in 4 to 6 floor rental buildings, and this information was provided to the city at a workshop last December with developers as part of the consultation around the housing affordability strategy. So it just seems to me that and I obviously don't have access nor would I be able to interpret the pro forma that Blue Sky has done for those rental units. But I have to believe that for them to lower the rents, they really need the participation of the city. And a key feature of the housing affordability strategy in this draft form is partnerships. And it seems to me there's an opportunity here for partnership between Blue Sky and the city to produce more affordable rents.
Thank you. You've given us something to think about. Appreciate it.
Okay, specific to that proposal, that suggestion, for example, taking the 1.7 that is in the affordable housing, that they would be contributing to the affordable housing fund and giving that up, I guess, effectively perhaps, and asking for some other way of achieving that on site, and that would be through, are you suggesting that well, I guess, buy down of the rents be specifically directed at existing tenants of the rental buildings that are being displaced, or generally?
No, well, good point. I'm thinking, specifically thinking about the purpose-built units, the 57 purpose-built units.
No, understood, but it's all of them, not just those that would be occupied by persons that are moving.
That's one possibility, or perhaps reducing some of the rents below the housing income limits for select tenants. And I recognize it's one of the issues you went into right away is who are you creating affordability for, and who do you want to be in those units? So there has to be some management. There need to be means tests if we're talking about significant reduction. So I recognize that this is not necessarily simple to do, but it is doable.
Okay. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. We have struggled with the affordable housing issue, and I guess we all have our pet projects we'd like to do, but to spend the $1.7 million on 57 units or whatever it is, that's to buy the rents down when we have programs in place with the province and the feds, and they're supposed to be coming in and doing rent subsidies. That's what should be happening when we get developers. And I believe, and I know a lot of developers, these guys are being very generous in what they do, and I know they've met with you many times over how to, how to best deliver the product. But I guess, Sandy, I have to say to you, when you stand up and start quoting 30% and 31% and 39% of their income, I can tell you how many families in our city are struggling with higher levels of that they're bringing in and spending 40 and 45% just on their housing and fixing up their housing and heat and light and all that. So it's just not these folks that are having trouble surviving, it's everyone. And I think if we could do anything, if I could have my magic wand and go plink and do something, it would be to raise the minimum wage and raise wages in general, because our wages certainly haven't in any way kept up with the rentals. I would suggest that the province or the feds on one of their programs would be good to come in and offer some subsidies of some sort. And I'm sure some of these folks, if they're at those income levels, especially parents with little kiddies, that there's got to be some subsidies available to them. And I preferably would like to keep the money that I've got, the 1.7 that belongs to all of Coquitlam, along with any other money I might get for affordable housing, so that we could provide something that could benefit a lot more folks than just 57 units. But thank you.
Can I just suggest that I think if the province is going to come to the table, they have to be asked to come.
I'm sorry?
If the province is going to come to the table for a specific development like this, they have to be asked to come. I don't think they're just going to volunteer. I think that needs to be part of the...
Well, that needs to be up to the people that are looking for the subsidies. They can ask. They need to be doing that. That's the whole program. Out of the 8 cents per dollar we get, we do our job, gosh darn it, and it's time they had to do theirs.
Well, there are provincial rent subsidies now, but they don't go very far. So.
Okay, I'll stop it there because it's not specific to the project, but on behalf of Council, I want to reiterate our longstanding thanks and appreciation to you and your committee and your task group, rather, for the work you do on projects like this, trying to make these projects, these proposals, as good as possible. Thank you very much. Thank you. And our next speaker is Chris Roller. He's at 404-519 Foster.
Good evening,
sir.
Your Worship, members of the Council. Affordable housing is extremely difficult to find for low-income families currently in the Greater Vancouver Regional District. And those of us who live in the Foster Avenue apartments are exceedingly lucky to have found the rates at which we pay for the units we are in. And currently, Boza Properties stands to not only take our homes away from us, but also make the problem of finding affordable housing worse. I actually read through the entire 212-page brief that was on the Coquitlam City website, and I had a lot I wanted to speak about today, but I've only got 5 minutes, so I picked a couple of very salient points. The first is that on page 17 of that brief, Boza Properties states that the average size of the units in the current Foster buildings are 919 square feet. The standard deviation on that average must be extremely high because my unit is 1,600 square feet. We pay $1,450 a month for that unit, which comes out to about $10.88 per square foot per annum. Now, for the purpose-built rental housing that they are suggesting, a two-bedroom unit, which is 1 bedroom less than my townhome, will be on average 900 square feet. And assuming that they were willing to let me pay $1,450 a month for that unit, that would push the cost up to $19.33 per square foot per annum, effectively doubling our rent. This is simply not affordable for most low-income families or groups such as myself. We are a group of 4 people in my age of 25 to 30 who are sharing this 3-bedroom condominium. The second point that I wish to address is their offer of putting 12 months' rent towards a mortgage for one of their strata units. In the case of my unit, that's $17,400. Assuming what they showed us during one of their committee meetings, that their 3-bedroom unit in these strata buildings will cost $450,000, that is a 3.86% discount, which is nearly insignificant. If I were to take that $17,400 to a mortgage lender and say I'd like to use this as a down payment on a $450,000 mortgage, they would laugh at me. In order to get a mortgage that would fit within the $1,450 rent that we are currently able to pay, it would have to be a $350,000 mortgage amortized over 35 years. Assuming an average interest rate of 3.30%, which is what a person of average credit rating gets, that would eventually accrue $222,513 in additional cost over a 35-year mortgage, which, again, as I say, for low-income families, this is money that we just simply don't have. My final point that I wished to make was that Boza Properties has been saying a lot about a housing and relocation coordinator. I have not seen them. I have not received any information on how to contact them. So I think Boza Properties needs to get on the ball with that. Thank you very much for your time, Councillors, Your Worship.
Okay, just to be clear, this proposal is a proposal still. I don't know that the applicant could possibly start contacting people about relocating until the proposal is approved, at least a little bit further than it is now.
Well, at the moment, all of their language regarding the housing coordinator and relocation coordinator has been that it is a present tense matter, that this person is present and has been hired, and we've not seen sight or sound.
Okay. Yep. Thank you very much. Just for the audience, I'll just be a little bit semantic, perhaps. It isn't Boza so much that is, or this applicant that is proposing to take away homes. The owner of the homes, the owner of the landlord, essentially sold his property or has put his property on the market for redevelopment. So it really is the person that owns a piece of 50-year-old rental property that has got it up on the market. It's not, I don't want you to vilify people. Let's just have a discussion about the land use issues that council is here to hear about. So, and our next speaker is Mr. Albert Poy. And Mr. Poy lives at 2340 Haversley. Good to see you again, Mr. Poy.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, the councillors, and guests. I'd like to thank Blue Sky Properties. They did a very nice presentation. And I know they had lots of meetings with people in Coquitlam, but I want to comment that you forgot about the rest of us that live in Austin Heights and have to share in the high density that you're creating. You ignored us. You'll wonder why I'm making this presentation. Well, I've been in Coquitlam 50 years. I've seen many high-density presentations, and I keep coming back to the same thing to this council. I want to see a presentation that is fully costed out. I want to see one that I know that I'm getting something for me as a taxpayer, that we're not selling out to developers and selling it too cheap. Let me give you a couple examples. No one in all the presentations have they told me what the engineered capacity for the roads are. I don't know what Foster Avenue, how many traffic or cars should be on it, North Road, Como Lake, Austin, or Blue Mountain. But I can tell you this, you try crossing Blue Mountain, you've got a problem, a safety problem. You try crossing Austin, you've got a safety problem. Como Lake's the same. Yet no one will come and tell me what the engineered capacity of these roads are. This project wants to put another 2,000 people in Coquitlam. It's a monster project. It's not suitable. The area is not designed to have that many people. Nor are the roads designed to have that many additional cars. Please consider the safety issue. We have children walking to school. Second, they talked about $22 million. Great, in development costs. But did that pay for the sewers, the water?
That's what it's for.
No, not from what I understand, it did not. I have been down to City Hall several times. All this development is being subsidized by our present long-term taxpayers. I see the mayor shaking his head, and that's great.
Well, it can't be. That's why it can't be subsidized by taxes. It's not against. It's against the rules. So
it may be against the rules, but these costs are not covering the new water, sewer, storm sewers that went in. I've been following this. I'll give you an example. You redid the one in Schoolhouse 3 times. 3 different times. You tore it up. And when I questioned it, The answer was, it's different budgets. When you say we're not subsidizing it, since 1972, Mayor Stewart, our taxes have gone up 44%, or, if compounded, over 60%. That's way above inflation. Where's this money going? I'll ask you another question. 3 years ago, I wrote to everybody on council, including you, sir, and I asked a simple question. What would the operating subsidy be for the Evergreen line? And would any of the development costs be used for future development to pay for this? Do you know what the answer was from our council?
Well, the answer is...
No, I'll tell you.
Okay, go ahead.
You wrote back and said no one asked the question. 2 other councillors wrote back and said no one knows. 2 other councillors wrote and said they would get me an answer. Well, it's over 3 years, gentlemen and ma'am. I'm still waiting for the answer. No one knows. I even contacted Translate. And it's ironic. You're doing this massive development, going to plug up the roads, and yes, it does affect me. They drive on Como Lake. They drive on Austin. It's unsafe. You keep thinking you can put all these additional people in without building a road. They're not all going to take transit. And right now you create a density problem, and ironically this week you're asking me to vote on a 0.5% increase for the problem you're creating. I want to know what's in it for us before you pass this proposal. And believe me, nothing against Blue Sky. You did a good job. There's nothing in it for us except increased taxes, increased congestion. The Coquitlam Rec Center is overflowing today. Our schools, all I hear, we need new schools, but I don't see anything in these proposals. Building the schools, building a new rec center, $683,000, it'd be nothing. I can't see how anybody or any member in this council, for safety reasons, a decent community, can approve such a blatant abuse of our district. I go back to Mayor Jim Ton, Mayor, just a second.
Your 5 minutes are up. I'll
wrap it up right now.
Go ahead.
And we voted in Coquitlam not to have apartments or high density, and that goes back in the 70s. And I think it's still on the books. Thank you.
Well, that was the same era that our first high-rise was built. Thank you very much. I will assure you, though, that under the era of development cost charges, community amenity charges, the bonus density charge that's aimed at a new rec center that answers the question that you had about rec center capacity, we are trying to address some of the shortcomings of previous policies, because it's true, Coquitlam never had the resources, never had the amenities, and has been all my life. I've been in Coquitlam 55 years, and Coquitlam and Millardville are the 2 neighborhoods that were completely ignored, didn't have the amenities, and we're trying to put those in. We've got parks planned, we've got community centers planned, and in fact, you've heard some of the capacity on roads that we are improving in order to accommodate the challenges of a neighborhood that has been ignored for 50 years. I do appreciate your comments, though. Thank you very much.
A high density isn't going to help. It's just going to make it worse, Mayor.
Well, we're putting that around SkyTrain stations. But anyway, thank you very much. Oops, there he is. Our next speaker is Beatrice Hicks at 811 Grover. Beatrice.
Thank you, Your Honor and City Council. I was just going to pass.
Pull your microphone pointed to you.
I was going to pass, but no, I'm not.
It's up to you.
With the development, I really like this proposal. I don't mind high density. However, some of it's going to spill out into our community, especially in the summer when people want to get out of their condos and high-rises. They're going to be out in the community. You mentioned parks. I haven't heard from City Council anything about park improvement or parks. I haven't heard anything about teeter-totters, covered picnic tables, basketball courts, all the things that children can do in the summer.
You're about to.
You're right. We have been ignored all these years. I've been in the community for 40 years, and we've been totally ignored, especially when we had open ditches and we voted down your community center. Anyway, I want to tell you a short story. I had a little apple tree in my backyard, and it had full of apples. I had to give my apples away. There were so many. I decided to plant an apple tree in my front yard for all the children in the neighborhood to pick. And they came and picked the apples. And I think that's an amenity. I would like to see you plant some apple trees. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. There's interesting. Councillor O'Neill may have an answer to your other question, though.
Well, thank you. I will. It's exactly a question that I had leading up to this public hearing, specifically about Cottonwood Park, which is just a little to the east of this development, and I think we'll end up playing a very important role in the livability of the area. Currently, Cottonwood Park is quite a modest little park, 2 acres or so, and it's in need of some better regular maintenance as well. I walked the park over the weekend, and there's lots of little bald spots, and that's probably due to the beetle infestation these days, but there's also a lot of pretty high weed areas. So we do need better maintenance, but more importantly, I think we need to look to the future to expand that park. And to that effect, I've asked the General Manager of Parks, Rec and Culture to come up with some information that he can talk to us publicly about what sort of long-term vision we have for Cottonwood Park, that modest little park just to the east of this proposed big development. What can we look for in the future there? And maybe if the chair would allow it.
You sounded prepared. I thought I wanted to add that sometimes bald spots simply are a sign of age.
Wisdom.
Wisdom. But Mr. Alueva.
I wouldn't know. In any event,
you're quick to point out.
Yes, thank you. As most of the public probably know, we are working on the neighborhood plan for Coquitlam and Lougheed, and that process is underway. It is through that process that we will be refining and developing the entire amenity package for this neighborhood, including parks, open space, recreation facilities, trails. However, the current plan does indicate that Cottonwood, it is currently 2 acres. It is identified for an expansion, probably several acres. We are looking to do some longer-term planning as to how that expansion would occur. But Cottonwood is going to take a more active, more important role in the open space needs of this neighborhood, and that is our focus, and that is our goal. So absolutely. Now, I think the question about programming, teeter-totters, children's equipment, when the time is right, when we've assembled the properties we need to assemble, at that point we would do a public process, we'd consult with the neighborhood and really identify the kind of amenities that could be accommodated in this park. Could be a water spray park, could be some play equipment, field, etc. Those are things that we'd look at once we have the assembly ready and the budget in place to proceed with it.
You anticipated my follow-up question, which was what sort of amenities would go into an expanded park and those sorts of things. Any apple orchards?
Well, at this point, that would not be something we typically would put in, but we do have a community garden not too far down the street.
Oh, that's true. Thank you very much for the information.
Thank you. And whatever happened to teeter-totters? How come we don't build those anymore? Sorry, it's another day. Okay, and we had Steve already. Let's go to Kimberly Wakil. She sent in something written as well. 301-545 Foster. Kimberly. That's this one here.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kimberly Wakel. I live at 545 Foster Avenue, and thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. I'm originally from Ontario, and in my early 20s, I moved from my hometown into Toronto. And so for the 12 or so years I lived there, was in a high-rise and had that sort of downtownish kind of lifestyle, taking the TTC to work and so on. And then in my early 30s, I moved to Vancouver and again lived in a high-rise with that same sort of lifestyle for about 18 years. I like apartment living, and I was not unhappy in my chosen residence. However, as I got a little older and married that guy, here's his pen, my husband and I found we really weren't taking full advantage of the downtown urban lifestyle, and in fact, we didn't even really want it anymore. We wanted something different from our home life, and that led us to Coquitlam and the Mosaic development on Foster Avenue. We considered ourselves lucky to find that development and bought one of the last remaining units. We were clear that the area would be under development for some time to come. So this is not a surprise to us. But, you know, according to everything that we read, our street was on the shoulder and not in the core, and that it was zoned for medium density. Ultimately, the new growth would look like our block, and that seemed like a neighborhood that we wanted to live in. Single-family homes, townhouses, and low-rise apartments. May I at this time refer to you to your own transit-oriented development strategy, where Foster Avenue is shown to be on the shoulder, which we understood, again, to indicate medium-density housing. We counted on that information when we made the decision to purchase our home. Later, I picked up this flyer at a community consultation event, and it shows pretty much the same thing. So I'm not sure how you reconcile that with Blue Sky's proposal. 3 high-rises that range in height from 28 to 37 stories, 1,816 units, and over 1,000 parking spots. Okay, so I get that nothing remains the same, and the purpose of this process is to rezone that property in question to high density, and I'm here tonight to ask you not to do that. Clearly, you can understand the turmoil that our neighborhood will be in during the construction of these large towers. The stream of dump trucks removing the soil from the foundations, the stream of cement trucks while each floor goes up, the cranes that will tower over our homes, backyards, and streets. The workers at the Intercore project right across the street from us park on the street, and it's pretty difficult to find parking in front of my own building most days. The Blue Sky project will likely have dozens more workmen on site at any given time, and I'd like to know where they're going to park and what thought has been put to how that's going to be accommodated during the construction phase. They can also work during the week until 8 p.m., sunlight permitting, and on Saturdays until 7 o'clock. This will be relentless, and the scale of it is overwhelming. Yes, one day the construction will end, but even afterward, the neighborhood will be, in my opinion, adversely affected. Most likely, a large percentage of the units in these buildings will not be owner-occupied, despite the 25% that was bandied about earlier. I can tell you that in our complex, those Mosaic buildings, they are 50% rented out. With so many being rented in the area then becomes more transient than what we had expected when we moved in. Although this is one way of creating rental stock, there is no guarantee that it is quote-unquote affordable, as the rates are set by the owners and perhaps are not under the same sort of controls as purpose-built rental apartments. And certainly the increased traffic, noise, loss of view, sunlight and fresh air, perhaps decreased property values are all things we're going to have to face. Now for myself, I don't really care about the property value that much. I meant to live in my home until I retired and perhaps even beyond that. But maybe I'll wind up in an environment that I had made a deliberate decision to move away from just years ago. Now, I'm sure that there's a tried and true methodology that municipalities and developers use, sharing information, understanding each other's intentions to reach mutually agreeable goals. Both rely on density around transportation nodes to maximize profits for the developers and increase the tax base for the city. There is probably already a plan on how to spend all those density bonuses that Blue Sky will inevitably have to pay. And at the end of it all, maybe this train has already left the station. That would be too bad. Too bad that despite the message you're getting from many of the residents in this area, the project will go ahead. Now, I wrote to all of you folks last week, and I said to every one of you, if you could step out of your own house and imagine that 37-story building either across the street from you or 2 doors down, and you can look at that and say, I like that. Okay, then you guys need to do what probably is inevitably going to be done here tonight, and it will be approved. But if that is not the case, then please I ask you to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks a lot for your comments. And I had similar concerns about the transition from the core to the shoulder, and I was just wondering if our General Manager of Planning might be able to explain, or someone in our planning department be able to explain how this perceived inconsistency can be answered.
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Wilson. Excellent question. When the TDS was approved in 2012, of course we had core station areas identified in Burquitlam and Shoulder as well, and this proposal has both of those. And in the core areas, 655 North, TDS identifies a minimum density of 2.5 times the lot area and above, so the highest densities in the core. And as you transition from the core into the shoulder, the idea is to gradually transition densities and build land use and intensity and building forms as you go into the existing neighborhood. Looking at this specific application of the TDS in Burquitlam Lougheed, we have the highest density on the North Road site in the core of 4.5, and we have 4 FAR density on the shoulder site with a 515 and 525 Foster. And also the proposed land uses also transition away from the core. So you have Transit Village Commercial, which is our most intense land use and highest density on the North Road site, and transitioning into high density residential, which is most applicable land use between the higher density Transit Village and the medium density residential. And with that, the density goes down from 4 or 4.5 to 4 to a maximum of 2.4 on the 545 Foster site, which allows a height of 3 to 8 stories. Now, working west from the Mosaic site, the proposal actually provides a transition on that shoulder, the Foster site, as you move west. In the TDS, it does specify that where there's interfaces between densities and building forms across a property line, it should be a 1-story difference. And the Mosaic site has 4-story walk-up apartments, and the rental building is 5 stories, so you have that 1-story transition. And as you go further west, the building heights increase as you get towards the core. And in the TDS for the shoulder policies, it says orient the highest densities and building heights towards the core when you're in the shoulder. So I hope that provides an overview. And I also note that when you look at typical construction between wood frame and concrete forms in Coquitlam and surrounding municipalities, there is I guess a step down difference, because you can only build up to 6 stories in wood based on the BC building code. Concrete or steel above that, and typically high rises are built 22, 23, 25 stories and above. So that's where you get that change in building height between wood frame and concrete. But in terms of the direct adjacency between this proposal and 545 Foster, there's that 1-story step down.
So I guess when most people think about density, they're mainly thinking about height, though. And so I understand why the building on North Road is the most dense, but it's not the highest. And most people look at the height rather than the density. And in the pictures that we put in our TDS policy, they're pretty straightforward. It goes from highest to lowest in a fairly consistent curvature, which in this case we're not really doing. So is it a matter of the diagrams that we put in the TDS maybe weren't the best thought out, or those signify density rather than building heights?
Yes, excellent question. In the TDS, there are those conceptual diagrams, and we took a look at how the TDS, it applies to a number of areas in the city. And in Burquitlam Lougheed, we have a scenario where we have a lot of different property sizes that may be in the core or the shoulder. And in the case of this proposal, for example, on 655 North Road, which is in the core, it has the highest density, but it's relatively a small site. So if you look at the possible floor space that you can obtain on that site that's allowed under the zoning, you get about a 29-story building, and also the underground parking capacity has been maximized, so that limits the height of that building. If you move over to the shoulder site, it's quite a bit larger. In fact, it's over twice as large, and even though it's a 4 FSR, you get more total floor space. And in this case, the applicant has chosen to accommodate that in varied tower heights, varied towers, with the tallest one being directly adjacent to the core, as it's outlined in the TDS.
Well, and we want our residents to be engaged, and obviously Ms. Wakel is engaged, and she's done her homework. She's done everything she can, I think, reasonably to anticipate what might be built based on the information that the city has provided in our open houses and in our documents. And those kind of technical explanations aren't really in there, but we have nice diagrams and suggestions of changes in density and stuff. But so I'm a little bit conflicted here, because I think she's done her homework, she's tried her best, and I don't know if we've made it very simple for people to understand what might be happening here.
Yes, good comments. I think again with the TDS, because it was to be applied in evergreen areas, that there is that conceptual transition from the station areas into lower density, lower height areas. But as we've shown in attachment 2, there's also a land use transition from the higher density land uses. We don't have the high density residential in that area right now. And that allows for an opportunity to have transition on site. And actually the medium density land use would be east of the proposal actually allows a height variation from 3 to 8 stories. So there's actually quite a range in height there. And if you look at attachment 2, it does have there is a downward trend in terms of those building heights. It's just that it's taking into account when you apply these conceptual approaches to real-world sites where you have varying lot areas, you can get that variation in the skyline, sort of a sawtooth skyline pattern, but the trend is from still generally from highest to lowest as you go east in this case.
This document on the screen, it was not part of our TDS though, was it? Was it in that TDS document?
No, it was not. This one is just demonstrating how the TDS could be applied in terms of the land use and density and typical zoning transition in the Burquitlam Lougheed neighborhood, where again there's a number of different size sites in relation to the core and shoulder as laid out in the TDS.
Well, I've only been a councillor for a year and a half, so I'm still new to all this. But when people talk about density, sometimes they don't understand how much of it depends on the lot area. They're focusing usually on heights, and so I just think in the future, if we're going to create diagrams, we need to do a better job of explaining, perhaps, that the drawings aren't necessarily depictions of the height, but more the depictions of the density, because it's a little more complicated than I think we've made it out to be. Thank you.
Councillor Zerillo?
Yeah, I had some questions as well, just some clarification about the high-density apartment residential. But before I get to that, this image that we're looking at right now, where did this come from? How was this generated? Was this a report, or it was in a published document?
This is in the public hearing brief, attachment number 2.
Right. So when was it created, I guess, is my question. Was it created for this public hearing, or?
Yes.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is that I find it interesting that we're showing this, but the reality is if you drive down Foster, Cottonwood, all around North Road, you're looking at 3-story, 4-story, 3-story, 4-story, 3-story, 4-story, and then we'll be looking at these 3 towers. It's not going to look anything like this, at least not for the next 6 years. So I appreciate the document, but it's a little late to arrive. So my question was around the high-density apartment residential, and I see even on this one document here we're talking about the shoulder can have high-density apartment, and it only talks about RM6, but there must be something in between all or nothing on the high-density apartment. Do we not have other options? You either have a maximum of 8 or you can go as high as you want. Like, is there not some compromise between RM2 and RM6 in as far as high-density apartment?
Your Worship.
Tiffany.
Thank you. In answer to the councillor's question, is the diagram is trying to illustrate typically when you transition between the high-density apartment designated areas and the medium-density apartment designated areas, there is a automatic drop in transition. Typically, the zoning that's used in the high-density apartment is the RM6, and as Councillor Wilson inquired earlier, this zone is regulated by a floor area ratio, so there's no height limitation on this zone. The height of towers is typically dictated by the size of the lot area. So depending on the size of the lot, it will ultimately determine what the height of that tower is. And usually these designations are adjacent to areas that are designated medium density apartment. And the typical zone that we use to implement medium density apartment is the RM3 zone. The maximum height that's permitted in the RM3 zone is 8 stories, but depending upon density, again, it's also a floor area ratio zone that manages the density. So again, depending upon the lot area, will ultimately determine how much is built out and how high that zoning can go. Typical developments in Coquitlam have maxed out at 4 stories, but with recent changes to the RM3 zone, it's made it possible to build up to 7 stories and hopefully 8 stories using this zone. But at the end of the day, you will have a transition between the RM3 zone of potentially up to a maximum of 8 stories adjacent to a high-rise, which can be anywhere from typically 20 stories on up, depending upon what that lot area size is.
I'm sorry, what can be typical from 20 stories up?
I'm sorry, could you clarify the question?
You were talking about RM3s, and then you said something about minimum 20 stories.
So for an RM6, because it's regulated by floor area ratio, typically those heights will start at 20 stories because the density is 4.0 FAR.
Okay, so what happened to our RM4s and our RM5s?
So with the RM4 and the RM5, those are zones as well that can be applied in the high-density apartment residential. But so is the RM6, and there are no rules per se with respect to applying that. And typically, because of the real estate values and the other market factors that go into determining the developability on these high-density sites, typically it's an RM6 zone that is applied on these high-density apartment residential sites. I don't believe the city has had an RM4 rezoning in probably about 15 years or so, just simply because of the nature of that zone.
Well, thank you. And I do understand the whole idea of the RM6. Like, I understand that we don't regulate the height, but what I'm challenged with here is a community that's going to have a lot more people involved in it. There's going to be up to maybe even more than 2,000 people. We're going to be somewhere between 850 and 2,000 people coming to this community, and there's got to be a way as a government body to be able to regulate how high these things can go. I mean, you could, you get a big piece of land, and all of a sudden you've got a 60-story tower in Coquitlam. Like it seems to me that RM4 and RM5 is a way for us as a city council to regulate how many people, and I know we don't know exactly how many people come in, but to control the amount of cars, the amount of traffic, the amount of ambulance services that we're going to need, the amount of firefighter resources we're going to need. I mean, we don't talk about housing, although that's what we're doing. We're really talking about people and quality of life. So I understand that maybe we haven't used RM4 or RM5 for 15 years, but I would like to understand if we're allowed to use it. Not that that's what this person is asking for, but I just don't understand why we have to say to residents, okay, you're either going from our medium density apartment residential to the sky's the limit. That's the only two options we seem to have, and I was just wondering if there is any options in between that allow us to regulate how many stories so that we can say there's not going to be 800 new apartments, there's only going to be 650. That's kind of where my head was at. You don't need to answer that, but I appreciate that they are available to us. RM4 and RM5 are available to us, not on this one, but they are available. They just don't get used, and they have height restrictions, correct?
Ms. Tiffany.
Thank you, Your Worship. The RM5 does not have a height restriction. It actually, it is an RM5, goes to a maximum of 20 stories. But again, the density is regulated through an FAR.
Yep.
So how that ultimately gets built out will be predicated upon what that lot area size is. It's similar with the RM4 zone.
Okay, so I appreciate this picture now, but as I said, it doesn't fit with what's happening right now on Foster, especially with all the new stuff that's happening across the street and to the west of it, or sorry, to the east of it. It could potentially look at what it's going to look like behind, because we maybe get some redevelopment behind, but it won't look like this. Thank you.
Councillor Morrison.
Thank you. I appreciate your very impassioned presentation, and I also appreciate the fact that as a new resident to the area, you did what council has said people should do when coming into a neighborhood. You did your homework. You did your homework and you looked at the information that was available to you and said, what's going to be around me? I recognize it's a developing and growing area, so I think that's the proper, responsible thing to do, so I thank you for doing that. From our perspective of council and staff, I think this is the slide we have before us now is a good one, because what I think the information that we had that we're presenting out to the public is that the core will be that high density, and as soon as you hit into the shoulder, it's going to be that medium density. And so my initial question was, does this fit the definition of medium density? But what I'm hearing from discussion is this is high density, and it starts kind of on the edge of the core shoulder, still qualifies to be that high density, and then we taper it down as it goes forward. So going forward, if that was truly the intent of staff and council at the time that the TDS was adopted, I think we have to take a look aside from this and update some of the detail that we're putting out for the public, and perhaps look at the wording here. So as we start to see the area grow and develop, as people are buying in, they know what it is coming in the area and what staff are going to be welcoming. So I think we can tweak a little bit of the public documentation we've got available in the TDS. I would strongly encourage that. And my question for this would just be, can you clarify my understanding now that shoulder would still contain the potential for that high density, and it's just tapering it down? Would we see, if this was a simple one lot, would we see that high density there, or would it have been, if it wasn't part of all one package, would we have seen the tower on North Road and a 5-story or 6-story on the first one on Foster? Thank you.
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Marsden. Again, just referring to the TDS and how we've looked at it in terms of the land use transition on this attachment here. The core, again, the transit village commercial, the highest density. Right now we don't have that high density apartment in the Coquitlam area, but if you look at the TDS policy itself on page 13, again, in the core, there's a minimum density, 2.5 times lot area. And when you add the additional density provisions that can be achieved there, you're getting into the 4.5 territory. And immediately below that, in the shoulder station areas, again, this is under Objective 2, develop transit supportive density around this $1.4 billion evergreen line. It says development densities and building heights should be highest adjacent to core station areas, transitioning lower with increased distance in consideration of local context. And if you look at the diagram below that, there's a couple of curves there, and that is meant to signify the context as well. I think that there is the idea, the other diagram shows that curve going down, but this one here was meant to illustrate that it's context specific as well. Yeah. And when you have different lot sizes, you have different existing built form, roads, other features in the neighborhood. Sometimes that transition, there's a downward trend, yes, but it's not exactly a smooth transition like a curve on a graph.
And I fully appreciate that and recognize it. And I think, again, my feedback would be just as we look to move forward is let's look to identify some of this and perhaps provide some greater clarity in a language I think that most residents would understand, and not those that deal with this either as bankers or as counselors or as developers and city planning staff, that perhaps we can look to write it in English and provide some examples. So maybe that's something that we can look at as we move forward, because we've got a lot more going to be proposed in this neighborhood over the next several years. So I think we can perhaps utilize some of this as a learning opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you. That's it. Okay. We get to now. Okay. Sarah Wahedi. Okay, just by quick explanation, I see some people putting their hands up as though they want to speak. We have a speakers list here that's a couple more speakers, and after that we will open the floor to those people who didn't register ahead of time. So Sarah is one of the last speakers. Sarah Wahedi.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Lordship and Council. I'm going to be addressing a few issues in regards to
the just very quickly, have to give you your address.
553 Foster Avenue.
There you go.
But
Thank
also
you.
208 Therian Street in Millardville. I'll be addressing a few issues in regards to the integration settlement concerns that will arise from the relocation and eviction of tenants from 655 North Road and 525 Foster Avenue. My area of expertise is mostly immigrants, refugees at UBC. A few initial points of information. It's important to note that 19% of tenants residing in Medallion Court are currently on government assistance. We're still uncertain whether this pertains solely for those on income assistance, also includes those on resettlement assistance from CIC as well. This neighborhood is imperative for many newcomers as it is central to ISS of BC and success.
I wonder, I think you've got some really good stuff to say. Well, we can't hear it though, because you're speaking really, really quickly.
Sorry.
I don't know if you had a cup of coffee on the way here.
I haven't. I'm not good at speaking. Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we, you're doing really well. If you could slow it down to about 33 RPM instead of the 78.
Yeah. Sorry.
And some people recognize the reference, but the rest of you lost.
Yeah, that's where the whole pre-law stuff comes in. This neighborhood is imperative for many newcomers. It is central to ISS of BC and Success, which are large organizations that deal specifically with refugees and permanent residents, so they help with integration, settlement. Demographical statistics are not available for Cedar Grove in the rental housing strategy. Blue Sky states that this information was not obtained as it will change before the building is removed around 2017. Regardless, this is important information that the public should be made aware of so as to better discuss the outcome of these projects and the relocation of these residents. In turn, it's also important to note that there's very dismal options for affordable housing in the area, as many individuals have brought up today. On the rental the rental housing strategy isn't with me. I should have sent it to the clerk. But there's a page where the rental market conditions are basically ineffectual, as this does not demonstrate the growth and interest in the area following the near completion of the Evergreen Line and the boom in housing construction in the surrounding areas. The rental market conditions that they provided in regards to this were from, I believe, 2012 or 2013, which again, substantial changes have been made since that time. As many concerned residents have mentioned or will mention, the increase in rent for this rental replacement project is substantially higher for an incredibly small area of living space. To assume that the quote from this rental housing strategy, which I focus on a lot, a renter would require a gross income of approximately $34,000 to afford the lowest price studio unit, equivalent to average single-parent household income in census tract. This is, frankly, not plausible and financially straining on growing families to live in a studio. Possible arguments that Blue Sky may refer to in regards to what I have said today, they have had a rental relocation coordinator on site to assist with the relocation of existing tenants. As one of the actual tenants has just mentioned, they don't seem to be... All right. They have mentioned that the rental relocation coordinator is there, but as a tenant had mentioned before, they don't seem to be present. Also important to note that the coordinator only speaks English and I believe an Eastern European language compared to prominent languages of individuals residing in the area, including Arabic, Farsi, Korean, and other languages. Another argument is that residents have been made known about the changes that will be implemented for the past year. Evidently, it's important to note that the rental housing strategy compiled by Blue Sky has exemplified the high tenant turnover rates that the properties have experienced in different categories, again, only available for Medallion Court. 30% of existing tenants have resided there for less than 12 months and 71% between 1 and 3 years. This illustrates that many of the tenants could be finding it difficult to stay situated in one area. Reasons may be financially strained, refugee claimants and or government-assisted refugees in the area. I'd like to point out again that I've specifically focused on the refugee and immigrant issues. I am not the expert on any other note, nor am I an expert in that regard. In conclusion, a few requests. Requests that the demographics for Cedar Grove are provided. Again, it has not been voted on, so we're hoping that that can be collated and provided, whether online or by Blue Sky. Request that the rental relocation coordinator assemble a team to reach as many tenants as possible in all of the units, including to ask questions such as whether they are paying rent with resettlement assistance funds, how and if this moving process affects them, and if they have a plan in place for the upcoming year, including volunteers who speak Arabic, Farsi, Korean, and other prominent languages in the area. These individuals have reached out to ISS, again ISS is Immigrant Services Society of BC, in regards to the language barrier many times, and should be given the same sort of accessibility to information as an English speaker is. Also, we would ask that they reach out to settlement, integration, and refugee organizations in regards to the issue and garner their advice and support. Again, my apologies for my rambling. Thank you.
Thank you. You did all that, and you did it under the allotted time. I appreciate it very much. We have one question from a council member and one from me, and I'll start with mine if we could. And mine goes back to the days 6 years ago when the Bhutanese refugees were coming and ISS called a meeting. One of the concerns that ISS had in expressing the need for identifying the housing required for up to 900 refugees that would be directed toward Coquitlam was that they not be in this particular neighborhood, that they specifically mentioned the Smith Avenue and Foster Avenue apartments as not being the place where we wanted to concentrate the refugees from Bhutan. And it was related to some of the health issues that might be related, the social health issues related to this particular neighborhood. Is that an issue that, I'm sorry, you began quite quickly. You represent whom?
Don't represent anyone. I'm actually on the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee with Councillors Munson and O'Neill. Yep. That's how I was made known about this, and I've been working with UBC and the Social Planning Research Council of BC to collate this information for you.
Okay, there we go. So it's
but I do know about this. I can answer your question.
Okay, go ahead.
I did speak to a director at CIC, which is Citizenship and Immigrations Canada. I did work with them prior. that this area specifically is quite prominent with the Bhutanese community, as you said, for the past 6 years. Also, the Afghani and the Iranian communities. A large boom in this area, as seen with the ISS of BC clients, where up to 65 to 70% of the clients reside in the Cottonwood, Foster, and North Road area, substantial for a small office. And in regards to the Bhutanese community, she had mentioned that they've actually just began to create a community so strong that they meet daily, they meet in the evenings at ISS and in different community organizations, on Cameron, where there's a community center, and that the area has become home for them. To move the Bhutanese community would be a substantial issue. It's important to note also that a year in regards to moving an individual for a Canadian who grew up here, obviously I do not want to generalize, would be the equivalent of 4 to 5 years for a refugee or an immigrant, as I have personally experienced with my own family. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, well, it sort of touches on the issue, because I get the issue that ISS was raising at the time was the suitability of the neighborhood.
It's because
I recognize that there have been some social service enhancements that have perhaps aided there, and I suspect that YMCA offerings, because YMCA does a lot of work within immigrant communities, would enhance that further. I'm going to go to Councillor Cirillo.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and you've opened up yet another area for discussion, which is about immigration and the importance of this area. And I believe it's kind of like Coquitlam is opening their arms to Riverview, being reinstated for mental health and wellness, and it's almost like the residents of Coquitlam have openly said, we want immigration in this community. They do. So the question is more for staff than for you, but really now, okay, so we're talking about a project. A lot of this discussion is about the project and about these towers, but really tonight, as a council, we're thinking about land use. Is this the best land use? And this is actually a wonderful factor that we have to think about, is what do we need to do for the immigrant population as they move into the community? And so I have a question for staff, is has the city been contacted by Immigration Canada to talk about the loss of these transition housing units, and have they asked us for other areas of the city that they could potentially be funding or putting money towards? Like, what kind of discussions have we had at the federal level or even at the social services levels to accommodate for different communities that we know reside, not just, I mean, we're talking about land use for one strip right now, but I mean, we've got to, we can't just think about it in isolation. We need to think about the whole neighborhood. So what kind of conversations have happened, or have they come out and said we need new space?
Your Worship, that's a very interesting question. The short answer is there hasn't been that communication with the immigrant services agencies or organizations specific to this site or this particular area. However, through work on the draft housing affordability strategy, we've reached out to a wide range of organizations and non-governmental organizations in looking at the full range of housing needs across the community and for different groups. So I believe we've touched on some of that. I don't have that information at hand, but that will be coming forward to Council in the next couple of months. Also, it is an interesting question that's been raised by Councillor Cirillo, and I think that's something that we could consider as input into the Coquitlam-Lougheed neighborhood plan update process. It is a very multicultural neighborhood. Actually, it's a mosaic of neighborhoods through there, and I think that's a good question to put to that process.
Yeah, because I mean, maybe our commercial needs to look different. Maybe our market areas need to look different. Maybe we need to have plazas like, anyways, thank you for your comments, because it's opened up a whole new area for me to think about while thinking about land use. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. Please don't go away yet. This is very, very simple. I saw you referring to your notes. I'm just curious, are they in a format that you might be able to share them with the clerk for them? Because again, to Councillor Zerillo's point, you made some very good points that we hadn't heard. So just to make sure that we've got them in a written format.
I did email it just to get it printed, but I can provide them for you.
Mr. Clerk, do you have them?
We did engage with the presenter beforehand. She asked that we not provide it ahead of time, but it will be attached to the minutes that will be prepared this meeting.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I did want to add that this actually arose from literally a group of 10 Arabic speakers who live in the Blue Sky Apartments who came to me seeing that I had black hair and said, help. We don't know.
See there, people are picking on my hair again. Just one moment. One moment.
Rightly so.
I'm sorry?
She won't pick on it for much longer.
She won't pick on it for much longer. Councillor O'Neill, please.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have questions for the presenter.
Thank you very much.
But a question for staff arising from, or maybe it's for the proponent here today, if the chair would allow that. Two of the presenters now, I think it was Mr. Roller and now Ms. Wahedi, have talked about the confusion or the lack of a rental relocation coordinator. Now, it's my understanding that if this proposal were to go ahead and be approved by council at some stage in the future, that an on-site rental relocation coordinator would be put in place. Is that correct, or was there some sort of understanding out there that there should be somebody around there right now to help, or to assist with some of the questions? Perhaps the chair would allow the Mr.
I will.
One of the.
It's okay. Well, what
Zuliani maybe.
If someone's got a quick answer to that.
Yeah.
Yes, Your Worship. The person has been hired, although we admit that it's going to ramp up considerably. Once the project or the application has been approved, and plus knowing there's a 6-month notice period for that. So there's quite a bit of time to work with tenants. But yes, a on-site rental housing coordinator has been hired. She actually lives there and is known by most of the residents, although our information is that there are some residents that don't speak her two languages, but when we've asked her that, she has said that generally those people do have access to English speaking, whether they're friends, relatives, neighbors, or whatever. So our information that we've been getting back is that the information is getting around. But there may be some individuals that haven't.
So she's been hired and she's on site.
Yes.
Is she actually officially engaged yet, or is she just kind of unofficially chatting with people now?
No, officially engaged. And we have put her name on the information, at least the last information notice as well. So she's been identified, but perhaps, you know, like I say, as the project progresses, then that's going to get ramped up considerably when there's a lot more to do.
Good. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thanks.
I hope that answers some of the questions raised by Mr. I think it was Roller and Ms. Wahedi as well. Thank you.
Okay, we're good. And our last registered speaker is Ray Chang. Ray Zhang. He's at 525 Herbert Avenue in Coquitlam.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ray Zhang. I live on 525 Liberty Avenue, which is 1 block south of the Foster Avenue. So I think the development is good, but it's those area I think is not for high rise, because it generates like traffic and also for the safety reason. Because I researched the web, and Robert Gifford, which is from Department of Psychology and the School of Environmental Studies, had a sequence of living in high-rise buildings, which talk about the high-rise. High-rise have been accused of causing many unpleasant outcomes. Among those examined in this paper are fear, dissatisfaction, stress, behavior problems, suicide, poor social relations, and reduced helpfulness, and hindered child development. So there's some conclusions. I think there's meeting after this one. To be short, my point is I think it's not, those areas is not good for high-rise. Maybe low-rise is okay, but not high-rise. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That's the end of our speakers list. Are there any other speakers to this item? And this gentleman here put his hand up earlier, so we'll start with him, and then please line up at the microphone.
Good evening, Worship and the member of Council. My name is Kenny Wu. I own and live on the 653 Aspen Street. So with all the high-density development going on in our neighborhood, I echo the lady was mentioned about the impact and the suffering that what the high-rise construction is going to cause. I can tell her that I have been impacted by that for the last 4 years. What I would like to know, which is I mentioned earlier, the expansion of the park. So I live. My house is in the on the east side of the Cottonwood Park, and it's the middle. And I have my neighbor, Mr. Barlin, and Mrs. Barlin's here.
One of you could get closer to the microphone and stay right at the microphone.
Sorry.
Yep. Thank you.
I have my neighbors here too. So a couple years ago, I believe the city had bought the the house on the right-hand side of my house, and they torn it down and turning into an empty lot. So since then, you know, it become a place where the I would say the squatters hang out, and also the people were staying there at the nighttime, and caused a lot of pain for my family and my neighbors. So it's all because that we have no idea what's going on with the area that I'm living in and the house that we're living in. I would like to know what the city's plan for the house that I'm living in and my neighbor's house. Especially the city have already purchased the house next to me.
If you have a specific question?
The question is just what Mr. O'Neill was mentioning about the expansion of the Cottonwood. So I would like to know what's the plan, what's the timeline with the expansion, because you talked about that earlier. So the city does own one of the lot, one of the house, and they torn it down.
It's okay, Mr. Alveva.
Yes, Your Worship. There's the city has acquired a number of properties in the area around Cottonwood Park, but the total amount of acquisition, the total amount of total park that eventually will be developed there is undetermined at this point. It's very high level. We are trying to refine the overall concept of total park, recreation, trails, as I mentioned earlier, through the neighborhood plan process, and more information will be coming out later this year. So we're working very closely with planning and development, but it's too early to tell what scope the actual park expansion will take.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Yeah, generally speaking, Council has made the decision that we will need more parkland in the Coquitlam area, and we will be expanding the amount of parkland. We won't be specific about that because those plans aren't specifically available yet, but we're continuing to work on increasing the amount and the functionality of parkland in the Coquitlam area, as well as several other areas in Coquitlam that are underserved. Ms. Wilson.
I've been away a lot, but came back to this, and I'm Maxine Wilson. I live at number 372979 Panorama Drive here in Coquitlam. And I'm thinking first that when this community committed to wanting rapid transit, and there was a lot of community consultation, we got it because we would have the ridership necessary to make it work, because you need riders on. And in listening to this, we knew that meant density. And the other thing that strikes me is I finally have a grandchild. We need to think what legacy we're leaving for future generations. My son lives in his home where a half a block where the light rail will go in Surrey. He wants to move to multifamily so he doesn't have to be responsible. That generation is different. They want to live in vibrant communities. We know that we've got to reduce the amount of fossil fuel air quality problems, and we need to use other modes of transportation beside cars. And I want to say that this is why this type of density is happening. The other thing I want to note is about 27, 28 years ago, my husband and I were in Sydney, Australia. In the downtown core of Sydney, where there is a lot of sunlight, the buildings are so close together and so close to the streets that there are no ability for sun to come through. What you are planning as a city is incredibly vital. You notice the setback, and it's better to build the density up than buildings almost touching each other and blocking the sun. So if you look at the plan for this development, it's putting lots of space between the buildings. The other thing we've got to get realistic about is everyone needs to work together in community to make this work. We moved to Coquitlam in 1973, actually in a cul-de-sac near Mountain View Elementary, which is this area, and paid $37,000 for our first house here. Think of property costs today, and what type of development do we want on property? Do we want multi-family houses, 6 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, housing many people on single-family lots, or do we want to plan space efficiently? The other problem we have today is our voice, and those of you that have been Metro Vancouver directors know there's been a continual lobby to get the federal government to reinstate transfers for social housing. And they are not doing it. It creates problems. I have from a very reliable source that the funding that BC Housing has now has gone down from recent years. It's easy to say subsidize, but where does the money come from? And so we have to work together as community, all levels of government. We have to be a voice in community if we want to support all our residents in ensuring that the funds are there to support things like social housing. And it's not really the role of City Council to fund that. It hasn't been traditionally, and the developer will do what they can to make it work. And I will say, having worked in former capacities with many developers, I cannot think of a more reputable development company than the Boza, Robert Boza's family. And they are known for standing behind their product and delivering more than is expected. And so we have that confidence in their reputation that this will turn out right. The other thing I haven't heard mentioned tonight, I heard ISS and Success. The 4 schools in the immediate vicinity would be Miller Park Community School, Banting, which has the Coquitlam program, because I helped found that, for immigrant families after school. And we have Mountain View, which has community programs, and we have Royce Dibs. Now, these are very diverse communities. They also hold land. We have city land. I heard Cottonwood Park, but we have city land adjacent to these schools, and hopefully there is partnerships developing with the schools so we can serve these families and the diversity of the neighborhood. I think that's really important. I think we as community have to think beyond how it's affecting us today to thinking the long-term legacy we're leaving for our future residents in Coquitlam. I hope that you pass this proposal and that you know that the developer will work with you to iron out issues that come up as they arise. And so I'm just happy to be able to speak to it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will let you know that former Mayor Wilson, I let her go an extra minute. Are there any other speakers to this item? Please, Ken come forward and we'll get, oh sorry, you're already standing? Go ahead. I'm not supposed to be traffic regulator. You're going to have to kind of line up in some way.
First of all, let me say that I'm not used to this. Is my first time I do public speaking.
Well, let's see.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of the Council, Blue Sky Property Man, and the Planning Department. I'm a simple man.
Your name and your address.
My name is Martin Pantelidis. The address that I live is 550 Cottonwood.
Perfect.
Right adjacent or parallel to Foster.
Okay.
What connects Foster to Cottonwood is Whiting.
Whiting.
Okay? I think they start getting the picture there. My point first is with rental units. 57 units against 800 plus? Come on, give me a break. Look at the price of the rents. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? This is high prices they want. And most important, they're going to build it phase 2, which is what, 3 years from now? They're going to replace 112 units with 57. That's my first point. My second point is the amount of cars. I mean, I'm quite happy with the high-rise and everything, right? But the amount of cars that are going to be there. People are people, and they're going to use Whiting through Cottonwood to get somewhere else. We can't. We're going to be plugged completely because our access to the North Road is blocked because of the SkyTrain. Okay? The other thing is, which I'm really scared of, I'm retired. I live in a rental apartment that has 22 units. And they live, they have the Cottonwood Park right beside. 70 to 80 children, mostly Arabic or African, play there almost every day in summer. Okay? Second, or third, I should say, nobody ever thought of what this is going to do to the surrounding area. We're talking about ground zero here. You give a permit to them for the high rises. Wouldn't think the other people are going to stand by and says, why did you give it to him? They're not. Concert Realty, which manages my apartment, they said very open from the start when they bought it, we're going to build new places. I mean, for the last 2 years they've been building on Smythe and even Foster, 2 apartments. They're all 3 floors. What's wrong with that? I'm sure they're going to make money. Yes, there's 2 apartments on Foster. One is being built now. The other, I think, is already it's already finished. And there's one in Smiles, too, that was finished a couple of years ago. So this is what I'm talking about. First of all these families. I mean, we're talking about 22 units with 36 apartments in each building. And all this, where are you going to go? I know it's not a problem right now.
No, but I hate to do this.
But I'm talking about what are you going to do? Are you going to stop
I hate to do
giving
this to you, sir. You have to speak about the project. But today is about the zoning of this land. Should this land be the zone that's proposed? We can't be talking about your building or other buildings in your neighborhood. We have to be on this parcel. So,
but if you give the permit to them, won't that happen the next year? They will take the permit too, to build high-rises, and pretty soon that's going to be like Lougheed and Wellington, mushrooms overnight. High-rises over there are like 20 floors plus, and they're just right beside each other. And this is going to happen here. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
I just want you to consider. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And Ken, and I will have you, sir.
Ken Holowanki, 873 Thermal Drive. Most of the points that I was going to talk about have already been said, so I'll just briefly state my opposition to rezoning this property. We had someone else speak how they did a lot of research before they moved in. They checked out what was going to be planned, looked at the bylaws, thought they were moving into a pretty good area, had a reasonable expectation it would stay the same. Conversely, Bosa bought a property zoned RM2, and he's got a reasonable expectation that it may change. Two different points of view. One person wanted to stay the same, and Bosa was hoping that it will change. One of the big things is there is room for balance. That was alluded to here as well. 3 to 8 stories is a long ways away from 37. One of the biggest issues is for sure all the rest of Coquitlam and surrounding areas, including Burnaby, Port Coquitlam, New West. That's 1,148 more cars on the road. Coquitlam presently does not or has not demonstrated the expertise to handle the cars and traffic that they've got now, never mind enforcing the laws. There's no room for one more car on the road until that is looked after. We're right next to rapid transit, fair enough, you need to densify, but that's what the transit's supposed to be doing. There should be no need for any more cars until the traffic situation is solved. It's been a nightmare everywhere, not to mention the construction, probably 15 years on now. Another point that's been brought up a lot is 112 minus 57 does not equal 0. So even though the proponent is not actually evicting any people, council will be facilitating that eviction by changing the bylaws or amending them. They're making it a little bit easier for some relatively good rental places to go away. The spaces that were talked about for sunlight to come in between the towers will soon be filled up as more and more areas get applied for or rezoning gets amended. Indeed, the word plan needs to be removed from Coquitlam's vocabulary because the plan is always getting changed and not always listening to you. You don't hear all that many people in favor of the project. However, there is room for some balance. It's just too big, and there's too big of a jump from the RM2 to the C7 or whatever it was. We already have areas for high rises already in the plan, so to speak, so we can work with that. There's Metro Town, Coquitlam Town Center, Lougheed Mall. We don't need this size of a building everywhere. We've already got areas for them now. There was another point that was brought up is are we really getting everything paid for, or are long-term residents in effect subsidizing the development somewhat? I would point out, I've just learned about the Cottonwood Park expansion. Where's the funding, even though I'm not supposed to ask questions, but it would be a comment, where would the funding be coming from? Is that coming from this particular project or ones like it in the area? Because the need for the extra parkland is for all of the extra people that are going to move in there, or is it coming out of the rest of our taxpayers?
You're perfectly able to ask questions here, and we'll direct them to a staff person that can answer. And in fact, there is.
Well, that would be one question.
I'll direct it right now.
Yep.
Mr. Alueva, there's some funds coming off this site. How much and where do we?
Yeah, the park acquisition and park development in this area for Cottonwood would be coming from development cost charges, which comes from development.
All of it?
Yes.
Even though you've presently purchased, that would be coming from other DCCs?
Normally, through the chair, typically those costs are repaid back if there's a property acquisition that's necessary, that it's timely, and it is part of a DCC program, it's covered by DCC acquisition, then typically those monies will be paid back to those accounts once the development occurs of the park.
And we could look at a summation of those accounts or a reconciliation where it would actually show dollar for dollar?
The DCC bylaw and the amounts of purchased property are all public. It's all public information.
Yeah, there actually is quite a specific reporting system for development cost charges, both on the collection side and on the expenditure side. Our planning on development cost charges is very detailed.
Okay, well, that's all I have to say is it's just going to be too many people in an area that isn't going to be the way it was planned out first. The sort of open plaza, 3, 4, 5-story apartments, fewer cars. It would be very streetable, but it will set a precedent, and pretty soon there will be a tunnel of towers all the way down North Road to Lougheed Mall unless we stick to the original plans. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sir.
I'd just like to state my name. My name is Chong Park from 520 Cottonwood. We have a choice to our future generations as to what we are going to do. Someone talked earlier that she talked about immigrants, and she talked about success and ISS, Islamic, and all those things. I speak here today as an immigrant who came to Canada 45 years ago. My parents came to Toronto, and after I attended high school and post-secondary education here in Canada, as well as in some states. Now, I observed many things, and I think some of the things what I'm going to say here today help you to think about what's going to happen in the future. We are so obsessed with the helping this group of people, that group of people. My experience as a new Canadian here in this country was the best thing is when they immerse into the society and not just stays as one group. Now, here in North Road area, some has said that, well, because that's a low income and a low cost housing and so on, and we should remain at there. From my experience in Toronto and in some of the cities in Detroit and Flint, Michigan, and other places, if you leave a place, low housing, wood frame building that's aged 50, 60, 70 old in future, it's going to run into a slum. And if you want to have a slum, this Coquitlam area as a slum, as a city, as well as the homeowners around, it's up to you. But I think you have a choice. Now, I've never met the people from Bosa. I don't know them. But from the presentation, what I've seen is that it's elegant buildings with some green spaces, and they could maybe improve upon that and having more. You can have a building, concrete building, but you can have something that's inspiration, and people around it, they can be inspired to make it, and that's what architecture is. Now, I come from a background of engineering and maintenance, and from what I see is that it's something that you can take as an inspiration in the area, and other people say, yeah, we can do better, and see something, and so on. From my experience of seeing cities in Detroit and Flint, Michigan, and other places, you live in an area and aim yourself to the lowest the cost and the lowest income people, then you're going to end up the area as a slum in the future where nobody wants to live. Now, the city has made a decision, and the Greater Vancouver has made a decision such that there is a LRT has a Evergreen line has been through. Now, to have that line sufficiently operating, and I come from a person from an engineering and maintenance background, you need a number of people who ride on it. Now, from what I can see is that not everybody is going to drive cars just because they live in there. One of the reasons they chose to live in these units is so that they can ride the SkyTrain. That was the motive for them to buy. So for them to just worry about traffic, well, if you bought the area in 1970, you are not concerned that the SkyTrain was coming in. We live in year 2015, in the 21st century. If you aim yourself toward the living in the past, and you concern yourselves with just the lowest income people and refuge and so forth, well, then you're going to end up with a whole bunch of group of low-income people and low amount of refuge, and that's going to have a negative effect in the city. As a property owner in the city, I do object to this particular thing. So I think that BOSA probably has done, we should be honored that BOSA has come into this city and to work with the city, and from the looking at what planning has done and they have done, they've done a pretty good job. And there are some areas of improvement. Now, as for the low-income people and for the renters, and it's only fair that we should give them a reasonable rent, especially for the people who are living in the BOSA sky. And I think that there should be some concern in that. Now, when I looked at the plan, that the rental building was a little bit lower, maybe you could give them another 2 floors on that building, and that provides you extra units of rental, extra income for you, and therefore they can offset, lower the rental for those rental units. And that will probably satisfy most of the people who are living in the BOSA sky in the current phase, as well as who might be in the future. And they'll be getting something old units, old aged building, and compare with something new. And so there's a trade and balance. And so sometimes you can lower the river, sometimes you can raise the bridge to pass a ship. The main thing is the ship needs to pass. So, I was not going to speak here today, and that's not why I came. I just came to see.
And you're going to have to wrap up.
Yes, sir. Yes. I will do that. So we have a choice. You can have either, the old age, the dirty old slum, that's going to happen 10, 20, 30 years from now, or you can have something beautiful like something like a Newport Village type of area in Port Moody, plus some other things. And I think if they do it architecturally right and some extra green spaces with more lighting, I think you will have something very beautiful place in Coquitlam. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Next speaker, please, sir.
Your Worship, councillors, thanks for this opportunity to speak. I look at this whole project at a high level. I don't have time. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not used to doing this. Silvano Padovan. I live at 560 Ebert Avenue, block just immediately south of the project. Anyways, I haven't read all the pages of the document, but at a high level, I look at the Coquitlam or North Coquitlam Community Plan, whatever it is that's under development, and I notice it's not completed at this point. And I think that that's supposed to represent the voice of the community. That's part of it. Council is involved, staff, the community. We haven't got that document yet. And I think that entertaining a proposal like this at this time is wrong. We have to wait for the community to fully speak. So, having said that, if you're not going to wait for that document, because there seems to be some urgency to this, I guess we have to rely on the TDS. Now, the TDS document, myself and a lot of people in the community have looked at it, and we thought we understood it, but tonight, wow, this picture that I saw tonight, that was new to me. I've never seen that before. That puts a whole different light on what I thought what the TDS was. I mean, I was focusing on what the core high-density area was and then the shoulder area. I didn't envision anything like this, and I think some of the councillors here were asking some questions. I think that the document is flawed. If people don't fully understand this document, how can we make a decision based on a document like this that people don't fully understand? There's a lot of bureaucratic mumbo-jumbo, which I'm sure those people understood, but the average person here does not understand. I don't understand it, but I understand the nice little pictures that I saw in the TDS, and I understood transition. And I understand the English language a little bit, even though it's my second language, but transition from 37 to 5 to 4, I forgot the numbers, but that's not transition. That's falling off a cliff. So I think we've kind of lost something here, you know. So I'm not opposed to high density. I welcome the Evergreen Line. I've waited for 20 years like everybody else, or however long it's been. I lived in the area for 35 years. I welcome density, but we have to make responsible decisions on how we have this high density implemented. Falling off a cliff from 37 stories down to 5 and calling it a transition doesn't fit with me. Now, some of those buildings have just been built there, those 4 stories and 3-story buildings on Foster, so they're not going to change. There's no opportunity for transition in my view on this. You're falling off a cliff from 37 stories down to the new buildings that we have, the black and whites, and I'm not sure what the other buildings are. So, and then we have Ebert Avenue. Okay, that's my special interest. 3-story building. So, actually it's a 2-story building, but there's 3-story single-family dwellings there. So, it just doesn't fit in with the community. And I beg councillors and the mayor to actually listen to the community and think about the community. Yeah, Boza has got a great reputation. I have nothing against the developer. Build the buildings, but not here and not at 37 stories. I don't know what the right height is, but 37 down to 5 is not a transition. It's not a good fit in the neighborhood. We really need to consider what we're doing here. In looking at the TDS, there was some wording I'm not sure I understand, but it was something about mitigate interim adjacency issues. Well, that tells me that, you know, if you've got adjacent buildings that you've got issues maybe, like some might be higher than other ones, that you have to do something about it. I don't see any mitigation of these interim adjacency issues happening here. So I just ask council and your worship to really think hard about this and listen to the community, wait for the community plan to be completed, and maybe fix this flawed document and then entertain an application like this. Not deal with the application, approve it, and then fix the flawed document, which the public doesn't understand. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Ma'am?
Good evening, Worship and Council.
I'm
Viola Kasdorf from 613 Adler Avenue. I have very little to say, other than I am concerned about traffic because I have trouble now. Foster is more or less the only one because Cottonwood is closed, and this new street that they're talking about will also not get onto North Road. Last year, when the condos were being built on Foster, I had difficulty getting out of my driveway because of the practically, we phoned 3 or 4 times. So I am concerned about more building, more construction in the area. I'm also concerned about all the extra population because how would a fire truck get in there with so little entry? And also more people in the area. You go to the hospital, you sit there for an hour or 2 hours. There's a lack of doctors. So we're also having, and what about schools? Will that facilitate? Do we have enough schools for that amount of people in the area? So those are my concerns. And I would appreciate, I've had a beautiful view for 40 years. That will be taken away because I certainly don't want to have to look at those high rises. I think we can keep them to a lower level. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Richard.
Sorry, Councillor Wilson. My apologies.
I was wondering, we've had a lot of people ask about the traffic issues, and Mr. Zuliani had a slide on there with the traffic flows, but he went through it fairly quickly when they were talking about the traffic studies. Would it be possible for Mr. Zuliani to go over that again, but a little bit more slowly and a little bit more in depth?
Okay, we've had precedent, so if you'd like to answer the question now, that's fine.
I can deal with that generally, or we have...
If you're going to need the microphone, though.
Oh, yeah.
Or
we can have a traffic consultant provide that. Would be more
that would probably be even better then.
I just thought rather than waiting until the end, because a lot of people seem to have the same question.
Well, accuracy is always better. So,
Your Worship, members of council, Peter Joyce with Bunt and Associates. We have been retained as the transportation consultants on this project. As part of our work, we have estimated the amount of traffic that we would anticipate this development to add. That traffic estimate is based on our understanding of projects, buildings, residential buildings in this type of a context in near proximity to rapid transit stations. We, again, based on the number of units that are proposed, we would anticipate this project to be adding roughly about 260 vehicle trips during the afternoon peak period. Certainly that's a fraction of the number of parking spaces that are being provided, but it's a reflection of the fact that not all of those residents will be using their cars for their trips. The proximity of the SkyTrain station, only a 5 or 6 minute walk from this project, will certainly attract a number of people to use transit. The trip rates that we've used are actually very consistent with the vehicular or the aspirations for this neighborhood, Coquitlam's aspirations in terms of non-vehicular travel mode into the future. The improvements that have been identified, the road dedications and the improvements, including the addition of the second left turn lane from Foster turning onto North Road, certainly serve to impact of the additional traffic that is associated with this project. I think that the addition of the Evergreen SkyTrain line more generally, again, is an absolute game changer in terms of the transportation conditions that this North Road area has experienced for years. North Road as a corridor has really been carrying traffic, not only Coquitlam traffic, but from the Tri-Cities more generally, and Burnaby, really a product of years of sprawl and really perhaps not sufficient investment in transit. The Evergreen line changes that, adds the equivalent of many, many lanes of traffic capacity. Not everyone will take the Evergreen line or transit, but certainly a number of both existing residents of the area as well as new residents will. So we're very comfortable in the analysis that you see up on the wall. What we have done is we've using traffic data provided to us from the city, we've evaluated the capacity of the existing intersections in the area, North Road at Foster, at this new east-west road connection, and at Cottonwood, both now and with this new development traffic added on. As Mr. Zuliani identified, the analysis of that future traffic condition overall at each of these intersections yielded a level of service A traffic operation for the intersection. Particular movements were somewhat more pressured, what we would call a level of service B or C, and basically that falls between an A, which is very good, and an F, which is very bad. So B and C conditions for individual movements, as reflected in the analysis, indicates that, again, the traffic that is anticipated can be accommodated on the area road system with the improvements that are proposed.
Now, we're going to get a lot more development, especially the property just to the north of this. And I know we don't know exactly how many residents will be moving into there, but how do we factor that into this kind of calculation?
Well, I do appreciate that city staff have been working on a comprehensive traffic forecast for the area in a larger context that includes provision, I guess, for other developments. So that is being factored in conjunction with understanding what the potential is of the Evergreen line to divert existing car trips away from the corridor. So I do understand that work has been done or certainly well underway. And again, presumably when other developments come on, there will be some road improvements that they'll be charged with as well to help mitigate the impacts of their particular point additions of traffic.
So maybe I'll ask planning then, the property owned by Concert right now, the 550 Cottonwood property, are there any road improvements scheduled for that area?
It's through your worship to Councillor Wilson.
Mr. Johansson.
Yes, thank you. So in looking at this this proposal, transportation planning staff working with planning and development looked at the TDS policy and with some of the other applications that have been brought forward recently. The idea is to create a grid stream block network in this area to support growth over time, to support the vision of the TDS. And this particular proposal involves not only improvements to North Road, Whiting Way and Foster Avenue, but also creating a new east-west road that goes eventually, once it's fully built out with the third proposed phase of development, would go from north, proceeding east along the north property line of this proposal. Right now it's shown as a half road, 6 meters of pavement allowing two-way traffic. But the idea is that when redevelopment occurs to the north of this proposal, that full road will be built out. So you would have another connection to North Road. And there's also a half road that's been built with the Mosaic or 545 Foster immediately east of this proposal, and with this, with the Blue Sky proposal, that would be built out to its full width as well, which would allow two-way traffic with on-street parking.
So the east-west road, the half road will still have 2 lanes of traffic. When it becomes a full road, how many lanes of traffic will it have?
It would have 2 lanes of traffic plus on-street parking.
Okay, so we could get another 1,000 units in the 550 Cottonwood area, perhaps, if we're getting 800 in this one. And so so add another 1,000 to these traffic projections. It seems to me that we would definitely be going from an A level to probably a B or a C. Would that be fair? We can't look at this in isolation, right? We know that the development's going to happen, and everybody's concerned about not just this project but future projects. So it's great to say that this project won't affect traffic too much, but it's not just this project we have to focus on.
Excellent questions. Looks like the Jim would like to chime in here, but again, the idea is a grid stream block network as the area develops, so that would be part of redevelopment to the north as well.
We've already got issues, though, getting out of Cottonwood Avenue. If people are getting onto North Road, I'm assuming probably half the people driving would be trying to get onto North Road. If we don't have extra capacity to get onto there, it just seems like it's going to be more and more of a problem.
Your Worship, if I could, just a few comments, and perhaps my colleague, the General Manager, Engineering and Public Works, might want to speak as well to this. And I certainly appreciate, not only for council but for the public, you get these sort of snapshots as each application comes forward, and we do the analysis around what are the traffic impacts, what are the road needs in the area, and you often hear us talking about a finer grain of road network. And council may recall, wasn't that too long ago, with another application north and east of here in Cottonwood was a proposed north-south road connection. So there is a plan that looks at this area and recognizes that Coquitlam, the road network in Coquitlam is pretty antiquated right now. It dates back to the time when it was probably a semi-rural area that was developed, and the road system hasn't kept pace with that. You got long east-west blocks with very few north-south roads. It's a sort of immature road network, as you will. As that area redevelops and densifies is the opportunity, and also obviously the need then to improve that road network, to add additional roadways, to add more pedestrian pathways and the like. So it's through the development of these sites that we're able to get these road dedications. In this case here, it's quite significant. I think in the initial presentation by Mr. Zuliani, I think he was talking to 25 to 30% off each site in terms of road widening and new road dedications. So that's really the opportunity to attain that. So I'm not sure if Joseph wants to add to that, because it's staff in his department of transportation planning that work very close with Carl's team in making sure that as these applications come forward, we are attaining the necessary road improvements.
Okay, so we'll go over to Mr. Engineering, Mr. Diozegi.
Thank you, Your Worship. Following the TDS document, our Transportation Planning Division initiated an area-wide transportation study. The purpose of this study was clearly to look at the larger area, not the traditional way how developers transportation consultant would look at the issues. Generally speaking, in many instances, the transportation consultants working for a specific development, they look at the development impact, they make some assumptions for general traffic demand growth, they model it, and then they will come up with a result. Whereas our Transportation Planning Division looked at the entire area based on certain assumptions area-wide coming from the TDS. And while the process has not been completed, in fact, it's almost like a living project, my understanding is that in part because of the road network improvements, what this development will provide and others would provide as well, and in part because the Evergreen line coming demanding a different travel demand, it seems that ultimately the new traffic demand will be met. I can't say obviously that the level of service at intersections and for all the movements will be A, but because traffic has a tendency of finding the right balance over time, we anticipate that for the foreseeable future, even with the new developments and the Evergreen line, the road network with the improvements will be capable of accommodating the traffic.
And I'm sorry, but as, the studies that you do, was it, you said during a typical traffic period or a peak traffic period?
Through you, Your Worship, that's through peak periods. Typically, we look at the weekday morning and the weekday afternoon peak hour periods for our analysis.
Okay, and so your ratings, the A rating on the intersections are for a peak?
The PM peak.
And I know this is maybe unfair to you. If we add 1,000 more units just to the north,
yes,
would you say that those might go change dramatically, or just
not substantially? Again, I think that the important point here to remember with this form of development and this type of a community in a rapid transit environment, for the 800 plus units that are proposed for this project, that's generating approximately about 260 vehicles per hour, which is between 4 to 5 vehicles a minute. That's inbound and outbound combined. So if you try to imagine on the street network, roughly 2 cars in and 2 cars out, that's not exactly the split, but that's in a minute. If we stood here and tried to imagine, that's the addition of this project. 1,000 units to the north would be just marginally more than that. So although it sounds like a lot of units in this context, it actually is a very manageable traffic number.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I'm doing this for my own good, but also hopefully for people watching. You know, everybody's worried about traffic, and it's good to get that information. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Zerillo.
Thank you. Thank you for this slide. I'm glad we brought it back because I did have some questions about it, and I didn't have a time to place it in. So thank you for this. My questions earlier in the day were just talking about what's happening north. So we have the BD Tower, the Crown, that's just northwest, and then we also have the other BOSA development that's just northeast, and then we have all of the development that will happen on Foster, and I think we have something, Polygon's got something coming. So were all of those ones in your mix of forecasts for this study?
Just to be clear, the analysis that we did was, again, very specific to the BOSA or the Blue Sky application. But we understood that the more comprehensive work that Mr. Diaz-Agui just mentioned has been done by city staff. So again, that goes beyond what kind of normally we would be doing. The city has done that themselves.
Right, which is what Joseph said. So when do we expect to see that one, Joseph?
Through your worship, we have completed with consultants' assistance the first run of the modeling, and the results are not contradictory what Mr. Joyce just mentioned. But we treat this, and we have no other choice but we have to treat this as a living document, because all of these studies are based on certain development assumptions. So if there is any substantial change in the assumed developments, either by the scale or the location, then we have to rerun the model.
Okay. So can I just mention now, because we had something come forward a few weeks ago in Austin, and we were talking about Whiting Way. And this is the one that's got me very concerned. I was concerned about it for the Polygon, for Vanessa Court, and I'm concerned about it for this one, is that Whiting Way is going to be a secondary north-south connector for people that don't want to get into the traffic on North Road. And the other one that's concerning me is Foster as it goes to Blue Mountain. That's going to be another way that people are going to want to avoid North Road. So I'll be very interested to see what we find out about going Foster to Blue Mountain and Whiting Way, all the way from basically BOSA's project that they're doing right now, coming through Smith and Vanessa Court, and I'd be very interested to know those patterns. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other speakers to this item? Please step forward.
Again, I'm Chris Roller, 404-519 Foster. I just wanted to touch really quickly on two things. One, I'm a little perturbed by the use of the word free flow as far as the traffic along North Road at that point, as there have been on times I walk to the SkyTrain when I'm going anywhere. I have beat the 97B line from Foster to Cameron Road because of the level of traffic that sometimes is available on North Road. So maybe perhaps a little more scrutiny might be indicated in the levels of traffic in that area. The second thing I wanted to touch on, I was a little perturbed at your use of the word vilify when I was speaking about being evicted from our current units. And I have nothing against Boza Properties. In fact, I think this project is beautiful. However, I believe that in the costs of a multi-billion-dollar project that this much must be, that allocating a couple of tens of millions of dollars to see to the disposition of the current residents properly shouldn't be a really big issue and should maybe perhaps be addressed by the city if Boza will not address it themselves. So that's all I wanted to finish with.
Okay. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. My only point is that if you're asking the person that owns the apartment building now to do more than Boza has already offered to do related to the existing tenants, then that might be placing a bit too, some might argue that places a bit too much burden on the existing property owner that doesn't apply to any other property in the neighborhood. We just had a project, for example, that BD Developments broke ground on that's built on an auto parts parking lot that doesn't have any requirement for rental housing. And if we only place the burden of future rental housing on those that built rental housing 50 years ago, then it's a societal good, and a lot of us believe that the cost of that societal good should be shared across society rather than simply on the property owner that built rental housing. We can't penalize them for building rental housing 50 years ago.
I'm not referring to the current owners. I'm talking to the future owners as Blue Sky Properties. They're building these units. They're basically charging nearly $500,000 for a space smaller than this council room.
I know, but the dealing with the existing tenants is actually a cost that's borne by the existing landlord in the sale of the land. That's simply land economics. So I wasn't meaning to say that. I'm simply saying that Boza isn't the one that made the decision to sell the property for development. That was the landlord, and he has every right to do it. So Boza simply bought a development property. So let's. I'm just trying to make sure we all understand where this comes from. Okay. Thank you very much. And I did let you up even though you'd already spoken. Are there any people who haven't spoken yet that wanted to speak? Apart from Mr. Violet? Please, Don, you're always welcome.
And I even waited. Hello, Mayor and Council, distinguished guests, and other community
Don Violet.
members. My name is Don Violet, and I'm with the Coquitlam Community Association, 640 Clark Road. The BCA goes on the record to support the development and to recognize Blue Sky's contribution to the city by the way of DCCs, CACs, density bonuses, and most importantly, their attention to the community concerns. Ideas and suggestions since our very first meeting in 2012 and their continued efforts to keep the community as a whole updated. We have had many meetings where almost all the changes were discussed and any concerns or suggestions raised by the BCA were addressed, or reasons provided if the requests were not possible. One of the main concerns was how to address the rental loss of 112 units in an area that relies on rental units. An offer raised was to build a purpose-built 5-story building that will include a 50-year commitment to rental. This will have 57 rental units to be owned and managed by the Boza Company. There's also rental of over 200 privately owned units, which is less than 25% of the 816 apartments in the 3 high-rises. And they're also expected to add to the number of rental units. In fact, more than doubling the number available now. To address the housing affordability, the apartments will be offered at market value. Blue Sky will also be applying an entire year's rent to renters that want to buy or a portion towards any Boza property. For those that don't want to or unable to afford to buy, and we understand that may be the case, but we asked them to try to do something like this for those that were on that borderline and able to do it. For those that are unable to afford to buy, they'll return the last 3 months' rent in recognition of the expense of moving, first and last month's rent, for instance. The density bonus program should stay within the community or directed benefit the immediate area, and that doesn't include an amphitheater on the other side of town. The density will affect those in this area, and the BCA believes that it was very short-sighted to have implemented the CACs in the town center and not in Coquitlam until after many developments in Coquitlam had already gone through the process of approval and the public process. In fact, an earlier BOZA project on the Safeway property applied for a development permit prior to the CACs being implemented in Coquitlam, and even recognized this, and still gave a voluntary contribution to the CAC fund towards the community center, close to $64,000, just because. That's very impressive. While appreciated, the $3.2 million that is spoken of the $6.5 million of DCCs to be paid by the Blue Sky Properties that is apparently earmarked to buy additional park space or park improvements falls very short of addressing the lack of park space in our area. The DCCs can also be used to improve park in another area, such as an amphitheater, in an area that has abundant usable park space, not to mention amenities, and doesn't necessarily have to be used for park space in Coquitlam. With the land becoming more valuable and combined with the lack of park acquisition planning, it appears we'll be extremely short of usable park space in Coquitlam for decades to come. The lack of park space was recognized by the City Council back in the 70s, and that was with much smaller population than existed then, and it's much less now, the park space, or with the additional thousands will be here before any new park space is on the budget wish list. So, to you, the ones privileged to sit on the City Council, don't just appear to listen, but please hear and address our imperative concern of lack of park space and the negative impact it will have on our standard of living in Coquitlam if we spend a penny of the money collected from the development in Coquitlam in other areas of the city. We will definitely be going down a path of being left with grossly inadequate park space in our area. So, please understand that we in the community are watching, and we will make this one of our top priority issues in the next election. And we will substantiate this by quoting those that answered the question on the issue in previous municipal candidates meetings, facilitated by the BCA, meetings that were recorded to ensure the ability for all to watch and review by downloading the ACM video recordings on Coquitlam.org. The BCA still has concerns about the planning of roads in the area or the lack thereof. Approximately a month ago, when Blue Sky asked the city for their traffic study, the city indicated this wasn't finished and not available and still a fluid document. But it was expected soon. This request was in concern of the closure of the right turn lane onto North Road off of Cottonwood. They essentially reduced the access while at the same time the population has increased in the immediate area significantly already. Again, the history of the city approving developments with no clear solution to obvious traffic flow issues is very alarming to us. Another example is the right turn lane off the southbound Clark Road on Tacoma Lake Avenue that reportedly has space for approximately 11 to 13 vehicles if bumper to bumper, which falls short of addressing the traffic backup along Clark Road with cars traveling from Port Moody. This roadway is backed up now almost every weekday for many hours, for many blocks, just as it is prior to the incorporation of the right-hand turn lane. No real improvement there, as we said it would be. We were assured that will solve the problem. The other example is having no clear plan for access except a one-way lane between a pizza store and a veterinary clinic that will exit onto busy Como Lake Avenue next to the existing YWCA, but still approve the building of a 26-story building with 180 units. and with more than 250 parking spaces in that building. Can you see why we're concerned? Parking of the workers, we've consulted with Blue Sky, and it's going to be contained on the site because they do have the space to do that. Another way the Blue Sky has continued to show their willingness to work with the BCA and help where they can is demonstrated by their latest commitment. At the last update at our latest BCA meeting, we found out that 22 of the apartments had already been vacated and would not be re-rented out again, and are all scheduled to be vacated by the end of the year. It was suggested that those apartments could be used as temporary location for a victim of recent fires in the area on a month-to-month basis, and for other cases of people with residency difficulties that the Red Cross may know of until the units are vacated for demolition in December. They've even proposed a reduced rate for severe hardship cases. This is unheard of. We hope to work with other developers who have the same interest in working with the community like the Boza team has. We're impressed. We want to end this by saying that we do support this unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Mr. Steblin, please take the microphone.
I just thought I should provide some clarifying comments on some of the comments that were made, if it's of interest, with respect to bonus density and CACs. While I have continually advised that we as staff are focused on the moral equity of trying to spend the dollars that were raised from a community in that community, and we are doing that. The amphitheater funds were not raised from Coquitlam at all. They were raised from the city center. In fact, they came from bonus density money raised specifically from the towers very near the amphitheater. The CACs are only being collected in Coquitlam at the present time and are only being directed to the new YMCA project that will be in Coquitlam. We are studying that issue, and perhaps we will be bringing forward a proposal to expand CACs to other parts of the community. But as much as possible, we are targeting the funds that are raised from bonus density and CACs directly to where they were raised. So I think that's important to note.
And I guess a similar comment could be, a similar theory could be expounded upon related to the parkland acquisition. We do have enormous parkland needs in Coquitlam, and the parkland DCCs will be more than used up, I suspect, in the expansion of parkland in the Coquitlam area. The DCC's parkland acquisition that are raised in there will get used in that neighborhood, because all of council agrees we need to expand that parkland in acreage as well as in service. Are there any other speakers to this item? Are there any other speakers to this item? The third and final time, are there any other speakers to this item? I'll declare this item closed.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's the last item on the agenda of this public hearing.
I beg your pardon? Sorry,
that's the conclusion of the last item on this agenda.
I just wanted to make it clear that we won't be voting on this item at the council meeting that starts in a couple of minutes, in about 5 minutes. I will motion to adjourn the public hearing. Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Marsden to adjourn the public hearing. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We will call a public council meeting in about 5 minutes to deal with the council agenda.